Okay, welcome to the March 26th meeting of the MCCSC Board of School Trustees. We ask that you please come to order. Tonight we begin with the additional appropriation hearing. I hereby declare this hearing open. Mr. Kenny, you may proceed.
Good evening, President Hennessy, Dr. Oswald, members of the board. The school corporation is funding this project through the issuance of general obligation bonds. The project is the continued payments for the solar projects at Bloomington High School South, Bloomington High School North, and Lakeview Elementary. The proceeds from this bond issue must be appropriated prior to being spent on the project. Notice of this hearing was advertised in the Herald Times. The additional appropriation amount is $6,105,000 and was originally approved in September of 2023 as Resolution 2023-16. Since bonds were not issued in 2023, we need to approve the same additional appropriation resolution in 2024 in order to spend the bond proceeds.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Are there any comments from the board? Mr. Kenny, I do actually have a question or a couple questions that I hope that you can answer. In the third whereas, it says that these funds will be used for improvements of Templeton Elementary School, site improvements throughout the school corporation, and the purchase of buses, equipment, and technology due to the project. So I guess my question is, have we put in an order for buses in the past few months, or do we plan to put in a new order for buses? And then could you tell me what kind and from where?
The last order for new buses we did was April of 2023. We're certainly on a pause or a hold at the moment, so no, there haven't been any in the last few months.
Are there projected orders for buses that are currently in the works?
Certainly people would like to sell us buses, but we don't anticipate putting any orders or purchasing any buses at this time. Now, if you're looking for total clarity, those orders from last April, there's an 18-month timeline. So some of them are here within the next 1 to 2 weeks, and the rest are late fall, early winter to fulfill the order we made a year ago and 18 months ago.
Okay, that's helpful. So none of the money that we're appropriating tonight is going toward any future bus purchases?
No, it's not.
Okay. And do you know of this $6,105,000, what portion of that is going to be spent on the buses that are listed here? Well, it says the purchase of buses, equipment, technology, and the project. So
the clarification on that paragraph, in August of 2023, it wasn't 100% certain how to spend all the money. And what we've done, certainly all 7 years I've been here, is you make your options about what you might spend things on as broad as possible so that you don't have to go back to the board if you have a little bit of money left and you want to spend it on certain items. So we figured, along with bond counsel at the time, that this description, this explanation covered every possible thought we could have about what we might spend the bond money on, even though it was always thought of as predominantly solar, which is the site improvements portion of the language.
If I may, this is not a approval of a purchase. It's an appropriation to allow for payment of past purchases. And Ice Miller, who's our legal counsel, advises to write these generals. So sometimes you may be working on one facility, but you may broaden it so that if there's additional money, then at the board, and based on recommendations of the operations department or the director of facilities, there's an HVAC issue, there's some other purchase needed. If there's money remaining from a bond, you have more capacity. So I think that there may be some confusion in terms of purchasing approvals and appropriations for past approvals of purchasing. So that's, to Mr. Kinney's point, what you're saying, what you're trying to do here is generally paying for projects that have started, that have been described before, that are solar. However, they're written general so that if for some reason these projects come in under budget, you have additional money that could go back to the board that could be used for other things. And they write them general, so perhaps costs are higher than anticipated for laptops and computers, and you need an extra 250,000, or perhaps in 2025 you decide to purchase additional buses, whether they're electric or diesel. It's a complete different process. So it just gives you the capacity to spend in these general areas, and that's the advice of legal counsel. As Mr. Kinney said, you all have been doing this for about 7 years, and this is the way most school corporations do it in terms of appropriations and budgeting.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay. All right. So it looks like we will proceed to public comments at this point. We have one on the appropriations hearing from Eileen Wenzel. So Eileen, if you want to.
Good evening. My name is Eileen Wenzel, and I have a brief public comment. What is the process by which these decisions are made? We would like to know details. Sorry about this mic. We would like to know details on why Templeton is specifically mentioned in the resolution. Have you visited other schools? For example, at Childs Elementary, there is a hole in the art room where you can see the outside. There are significant plumbing issues and foundation settling issues. There are leaking roofs and extensive termite damage. Childs also has 2 playgrounds that are in need of repair. How do you go about deciding which schools get priority? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you to Eileen for that public comment. And so I suppose we have this resolution before us. And I am turning the page. Okay, do I have a motion to adopt the resolution 2024-06 as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second? It's been moved by Ross and seconded, or sorry, it's been moved by Brendan and seconded by Ross that we adopt the resolution as presented. All those in favor of the motion to adopt the resolution 2024-06, additional appropriations as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Motion carries. This concludes the additional appropriations hearing, and I hereby declare this closed. We will now begin the regular meeting of the Board of School Trustees. This is a time that we typically set aside to celebrate the members of our school community. Dr. Stahlbaum.
Thank you, President Hennessy, Dr. Haswell, the Board of Trustees, and community members. It is my pleasure to share a few highlights of this month's celebration of success and our 2023-2024 Equity Spotlight Award winner. For this month's celebration of success, we would like to recognize Drew McKenzie, Fairview Elementary School's physical education teacher, who was recently selected as the teacher of the game for the IU women's basketball game against Iowa. He and his family were introduced at center court in front of a sold-out Assembly Hall crowd of more than 17,000 people. Drew does an amazing job of teaching all of our students PE while building strong and powerful connections with them as well. He is a great role model for our students, and we are very lucky to have him at Fairview. This month's Equity Spotlight Award goes to Bloomington High School South English teacher, Mr. Josh Quimby. He serves as the sponsor for various co-curricular and extracurricular teams and clubs, including the school's Student Equity Ambassadors and Black Culture Club. Mr. Quimby demonstrates a commitment and true passion for elevating student voices in ways that foster student-led learning. He helps students navigate tough conversations with encouragement, empathy, and care. Mr. Quimby's quiet leadership and commitment to all students through a student-focused lens serves as a model for the entire school community. Thank you for all your work in creating a sense of belonging for all students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stahlbaum, and congratulations to all who've been recognized tonight. We will now proceed to public comment. As a reminder, Mrs. Butcher will ring the bell once to signal you have 30 seconds remaining for your comment and 5 bells to signal your time has concluded. Another reminder, please, that we may not talk about personnel issues in this meeting. So if, and that especially means no naming names or people. But otherwise, please do proceed with your comments. I will call the person and then the person behind them to hopefully expedite this process. So we'll start with Amanda Schrader and we'll move to Elaine Hernandez.
I did not intend to be first, but here we are. Thank you for your time. I apologize for any brevity here. I wrote all of this on my phone as I had time today. My name is Amanda Schrader. I have 2 children in the MCCSC School Corporation and have lived in Bloomington for 11 years. I'm here to talk about the Childs Templeton merger and redistricting that is on the agenda. First of all, I don't understand why both the merger and redistricting are being considered. These schools share borders with other schools, and redistricting among all schools will allow for a comprehensive study and moving of students within the area. Redistricting is not a way, in my opinion, to take the focus off of these 2 schools. This was suggested by a board member at the Jackson Creek community meeting that people were using redistricting as a scapegoat so that merging would be taken off the table. I support fully a redistricting study. Personally, I wasn't aware of all of the issues within our school district until they were brought forward by the school board. Not because I'm clueless, not because I don't care, but because I have a full-time job. I live in a dual income family. My family has activities in life, and it's not my job to be aware of these issues. And once I'm made aware of things, then I can educate myself, which is what I have done here. As a business professional, I have both my undergrad and my master's in business and am a CPA. I really struggle with the idea of putting a plan together and saying you're going to proceed with it without having all the due diligence of cost and logistics in place. With my professional experience over the last 20 years, you do a lot of research before you push things forward as to what cost is going to be and the impact and the pros and the cons and what are the worst case scenarios. And I've been educated that that's not how things work with the school board, that you kind of have to say, yes, we're going to do this, and then everybody that's involved can start doing the research and the numbers and figuring out how it all is going to work. Depending on what the board does between the merger and the redistricting, I urge the board to have the foresight to be able to change or stop movement on a plan if it is determined to be detrimental to our students, our teachers, or our families. If the cost, logistics, social, emotional welfare of our families, children, or teachers are going to be harmed, please don't push forward with something just so that you don't have to feel like you look bad that your idea didn't go through. The timing of this is causing a lot of stress within the community. The original proposal that was put forward says that this is going to be put potentially in place for next school year. That's 4 months. I don't know where to enroll my kid. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Elaine Hernandez and then Dan Schoenman.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Few issues elicit more emotion than those involving the well-being of our kids. Even though we don't all agree, I'm hopeful to see the engagement in our community. I'm bringing both a personal and expert opinion to this conversation. As a parent of 2 MCCSC kids and a faculty member in the Department of Sociology at Indiana University. First, I'd like to start by saying that our daughter is among the first in the first cohort in the ALPS program at Fairview. We need to completely flip the conversation about this excellent, vibrant school. And I think this really speaks to our conversation about merging Templeton and Childs. Your kids would be lucky to be in this community with such engaged teachers and such an impressive music and arts program. And just to give you a little anecdote, did you know that at Fairview they have kids' wheels so they can have kids working on pottery? I was in fact very jealous when I learned this. Next, I'd like to speak to the memo prepared by a few IU faculty members. This level of engagement is impressive, and I really appreciate this start to the conversation, and I would like for us to continue this conversation. In one of the primary studies that they cite by Angrist and Lang, one of the most important takeaways is that the students in the receiving school with more resources were in fact not negatively affected. And to add to this conversation, adding to the collective body of literature and adding this to the work in sociology underscores the importance of families. Kids from well-resourced, higher socioeconomic families do fine in a variety of school settings. But in these programs, it's in fact the schools, or it's in fact the other kids who see a lot of improvement. And we have a lot of literature and a lot of work to suggest this. My expertise is also in community engagement. Using this lens, any report or historic or any reports or expert opinions need to balance the needs of the historical context in Bloomington and our community's unique needs. Our community is no different from others with a history of racial and socioeconomic segregation. We stand at a crossroads, a point when we can thoughtfully and carefully intervene to improve the inequities that we've seen in our community and that we continue to see. Within this context, I think it's ethical to consider the resources that we have available and how we distribute those resources. I do agree with the previous speaker that it's important to think very, very carefully about how we do this, and this is one of the reasons why I really do appreciate the work of the IU faculty who started the memo and others who are continuing to have this conversation. One of the most important questions that we need to address is whether the federal funding will be available to those at Templeton. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Dan Schoenman and then Bethan Roberts.
Hi, my name is Dan Schoenman. I live at 2304 South Sussex Drive, and I'm the father of a future student here. We're new to town, so I'm both excited to speak with you all and also disappointed that I felt compelled to voice concern over this proposed merger of Childs and Templeton. I want to first acknowledge that the socioeconomic disparity is absolutely an issue that affects educational equity. It's a driving factor in the achievement gap, but changes too and merits greater consideration. Continuity is wildly important. Its vitality in early childhood education is critical for positive growth. During early years, brain development is influenced by experiences and relationships that set the foundation for cognitive behavior and health. Continuity fosters a sense of security and belonging, which creates the emotional stability needed to effectively learn, socialize, and build self-confidence. It also allows educators to form a deeper understanding of each child's unique strengths and needs so that developmental nuances are more easily identified and supported. In short, it's the thread that weaves together the fabric of a child's formative years, strengthening the core of an environment that nurtures a more equitable landscape and mitigates the effects of SES disparities. This is supported by research from a variety of accredited institutions, but I can also corroborate all this because I attended 3 elementary schools myself, and I hated it. I don't recall the finer details, but what I do recall is the overwhelming feeling of anxiety. Having to reorient myself in a new environment, make new friends, meet new teachers was all quite stressful, and subsequently my testing took a hit. So not only did I have to acclimate, but this place told me I was behind, which added to the insecurities I already felt on top of being there to begin with. Now, low SES children are already the most vulnerable, and this merger will rip away potentially the only consistent thing in their life where they can find comfort and stability. But looking at this objectively, it simply shuffles students around in order to manipulate the data in a way that purely reduces the SES range. This is the sole outcome documented in the strategy proposal that I've been able to find, where mention of empirical benefits and recognition of risks is alarmingly missing. So this poses a litany of questions for me, but in particular, how does statistically altering this surface level metric ultimately benefit the community as a whole? How does this materially change the underlying factors that shape the district's socioeconomic reality, and how will that be measured? What resources will be employed to mitigate unintended consequences, and how are those being proactively identified? And for the parents in the room, I'd like to ask you to ask yourself whether, if given a choice and everything else equal, would you prefer a system that disrupts your child's experience or one that maintains consistency? SES disparity is undoubtedly a robust and pressing problem, but nothing worthwhile ever came quick and easy. So as a community, we need to think very carefully about what this merger actually solves and the mark that it truly leaves. Given this proposal spawned from an individual whose own dissertation concludes that, quote, perceived benefits of school reconfigurations were often hoped for byproducts of a larger economic issue, end quote, I implore this group to avoid flipping the table in favor of taking the time to sit down and work with those who maintain a seat at it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Bethan Roberts and then Katie Burris.
Hello, I'm Bethan Roberts, mother of 3 MCCS kiddos. There have been critical moments in history when we have had no data. In these moments, many brave individuals heeded a moral obligation to usher in change. We now have data. This changes the moral obligation equation to necessitate taking into account what research shows learners need right now, based on any number of variables. We know that kids with behavioral or learning needs do better in smaller class sizes, yet I learned from someone on the ALPS Fairview merger committee that the Fairview class size limit of 16 was removed by the district. Whether anyone agrees with it or not, that class size limit was a critical element of the decision to maintain a neighborhood school, which was intended to reduce barriers to access to school, particularly for children in our community who come from lower SES families. I also understand from a Fairview PTO member that they have no idea where the new ALPS class next year is going to fit. High-achieving ALPS kids have successfully raised the school's test score average, while at least in the short term, it looks like it might cause harm to the kids who have been there all along. Related to meeting immediate needs, I have shared the podcast Sold a Story with Chairwoman Hennessy, and I would respectfully request all board members consider listening to it. We have children all across our country who are behind in literacy. And what this podcast outlines is that we have a crisis in how children are taught to learn to read. And I hope future district leadership will leverage the extensive literacy coaching experience in our district when making curricular decisions to integrate moving forward. Circling back around, we have a moral obligation to take what is known and apply it, while also making incremental steps toward critical needs of society, including equal access to public education that nets positive educational outcomes without harming students now, particularly those coming from lower SES families. This is redistricting, and that process could then determine that elementary mergers are the right path. And then a plan could be made to attend to the infrastructure needs and the current needs of students now in the process, prior to execution. I again respectfully request that the board ensure a plan for the entire district to ensure the needs of current students are met in their many forms, while also taking the critical and overdue step of redistricting to balance SES and ensure access to positive educational outcomes now and in the future.
Thank you. We have Katie Burris, and then after that, Michael Burris.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Katie Burris, parent of a special needs MCCSC student. My support for redistricting may seem repetitive, but I am not going to let up on the importance regarding how the proposed Childs-Templeton merger will affect students with disabilities. Redistricting requires you to analyze this. Merging schools does not, resulting in zero information and grave mistrust. Please stop leaving special needs kids out of these conversations, not only for the sake of navigating logistics with IEPs and services, but to keep families together. Addressing this issue with field trips and assemblies is not a substitution for special needs children seeing their siblings throughout the school day for comfort, reassurance, and more. Change is hard is a phrase that's thrown around, but only addressed towards parents. Think about how an additional change in elementary schools being hard for young elementary students, and change is exceptionally hard for our special needs children who don't just rely on consistency and routines. It is critical for them to thrive. I am a proud special needs parent, and we have to speak up for our children because some of them literally cannot speak. My daughter does not have the ability to or articulation to say, "Mommy, I'm scared." Instead, this results in meltdowns manifesting in hair pulling and other ways she is forced to use as means of expression. To support the superintendent's dissertation, respecting a child includes making sure that decisions related to how she will be educated are done in a way to minimize negative consequences while increasing the learning potential. Redistricting addresses what the merger does, only with minimal disruptions, fewer school changes, and has a broader impact, reaching all low SES families in all elementary schools. To serve only these families at Childs and Templeton is a disservice to the rest of the low SES families in the district. The concept that anyone opposing the merger doesn't care about balancing SES is asinine. It is clear to see how this merger will balance free and reduce lunch metrics on paper, but you're failing to show how merging will improve academic success, especially for students with disabilities. Please, please, bring the special needs community into these conversations and focus on redistricting conversations and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Burris, and then Chris Cook.
Hi, thank you for your time. Wanted to address an accusation made at the last board meeting, basically that we were only interested in redistricting now as a delay tactic or just be in response to the merger proposal. And I agree very much with the speaker earlier of that I have a kindergartner in this school corporation. I don't know anything about the socioeconomic status of any of the students, how that is balanced, or any other uh, diversity, any other balancing like that. And so the only way I learned of it was when this merger was proposed to start balancing that. And the next thing that was obvious to me that to the correct step to balance something like that is redistricting. That is going to take care of the issue without the disruptions. And want to reiterate that I am pro only the redistricting, not the merger. And it has been brought up about doing both, and that seems ridiculous to me. By doing both, the only outcomes I see is you either hamper the ability of the redistricting to be successful by not touching the schools twice, or you do move the kids twice. And so I feel like the only way to do a proper redistricting is to not have the merger beforehand and have that restricting the ability for that to be successful. So many things will be basically destroyed by doing this merger between Templeton and Childs. I hear a lot about the multi-age classrooms at Templeton and how that is a wonderful experience for those students. And then I know also at Childs, a lot of peer learning opportunities where the sixth graders will come into the kindergartner's classroom and learn with them, teach with them, and that experience will be gone. And a lot of afterthought band-aids have been proposed to fix that, but it that it will not. It'll just be gone. That will not help that. Um, Also aware of we are now looking for a new superintendent, and that just seems like it's going to complicate things further. The idea of doing this merger now and having someone else be in charge of that after the fact and not be part of that decision seems difficult. Um, and even according to their dissertation, no school district could demonstrate through data that reconfiguration improved academic achievement. Last thing I wanted to say, there's a saying of between low cost, fast speed, and good quality, you can only choose two of those. And with this merger proposal, it seems we are only worried about low cost and fast speed and not good quality. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Chris Cook, and then after that, Jason Winters.
Good evening, board. I want to, excuse me, I want to speak to the Child Simpson reconfiguration. Groundhog Day again. I feel like I'm back for the third month in a row. I read the article in the Herald Times today, which addressed the high school rescheduling, and I applaud the prudence for tabling that, especially when it comes to getting new leadership in place to execute the plan. I would hope that the same rationale would be put into place with any consideration to reconfigure Childs and Templeton. It's really hard to execute a plan of that magnitude without any leadership to do it. And proposal is to have temporary leadership in the next year as a stopgap. I think that makes it really difficult. So I would hope that you use the same rationale in tabling the high school rescheduling to the Childs Templeton consideration for reconfiguration. Again, I'm not sure what's going to be voted on later in this meeting. I'm not sure if there's anything to be voted on because I've been told it's not a proposal. So I don't know if you can vote on a non-proposal, but whatever y'all are going to discuss and possibly vote on, I'd encourage you to use the same rationale towards Childs Templeton that you use towards the high school rescheduling. And then I would add, next year is going to be a lot with the addition of an entire grade across the entire district, again, without leadership of a superintendent. So my concern, again, is we're biting off a little more than we can chew, and we should get leadership in place that has a stake in the direction of where our community schools go, and we let them speak into these big decisions, and we don't rush and push things forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Winters and then Danny Raymond.
Hi, my name is Jason Winters. Throughout the discussions about the merger, you've said that you'll make sure that the key concerns that have been raised will be addressed, and you've talked about the multi-age classrooms, you've talked about transportation, a variety of other things, and that is very much appreciated. And I think that has been a good conversation. What I haven't heard from the board or the administration is any discussion about the downsides of the merger. And the reason I think that matters is that when you don't mention the drawbacks and the costs, the potential dangers, it makes it seem as if you're either unaware or unconcerned about them. I suspect that you would acknowledge that a change of this type and magnitude will not be a complete, unadulterated success. Something this complex will have downsides. It's very possible those downsides will be outweighed by the benefits, but when only the benefits are discussed, the assumption is that those downsides aren't being carefully considered. You individually or in groups may have already had conversations about the costs and negative impacts of this merger. You may have carefully weighed those downsides against the benefits. If that's happened, it's happened outside the public eye, and I believe it explains why so many are frustrated. Bringing the downsides into the light may seem intuitively to only make it harder to do something you want to do. I would argue that it instead builds trust and confidence that you're taking the necessary care to ensure that whatever changes are made are net benefits for our students. Our superintendent's dissertation and the research cited therein call out the need to consider the costs, both socioeconomic and to our children, when considering a school reconfiguration. It points out that fewer transitions during a child's school tenure are correlated to better results, and that the year of a transition is accompanied by a reduction in performance. The merger is being discussed for the 25-26 school year. The redistricting resolution states an intent to redistrict the same school year. To me, that suggests one of three things. First, that the merger is preferable for some reason, even though SAS balancing would be part of redistricting. If that's the case, I'd ask the board to clarify why exactly this is a better solution. If the teachers and students are truly blended with redistricting, the only real difference is in facilities and location. Second, you see the merger is more likely to actually happen. That scenario is why I mentioned the possibility of using it as a backstop during the last meeting. If that is the reason, and if you decide to move forward, can you do so in a way that makes it clear that redistricting is the preferable option, and that the merger will be done if redistricting isn't? Third, you may see doing both of these things to be beneficial, even if you're certain redistricting will happen. In that case, can you please explain how these things work together and how you'll avoid impacting students twice, for example, by ensuring that they happen in the same academic year? Put another way, if you were 100% sure that redistricting would be complete by 25-26, would you still want this merger? Personally, I'd prefer to see redistricting, even if it was only in the Templeton and Childs catchment zones. It would leave both schools with broader grade ranges, fewer transitions, older children as role models, and all the other benefits shown in the research. I believe that good would come from a merger. I also believe it would have negative side effects as well. And I hope that the board will acknowledge that there will be downsides to this merger, and that they will also look and present those downsides so that we believe that you have done a careful and thoughtful analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Danny Raymond and then Katie Edmonds.
Good evening. My name is Danny Raymond, and I am an MCCSC parent of 2 elementary-age children at Childs. I have stood in these meetings before to make a case for considering redistricting, but I'm not really here to do that tonight. I believe that the reasonings I have for considering redistricting have been more than covered by other comments and conversations before tonight. I am here to appeal to all of us as a collective community to work toward equity for all of the students in our district together.
There are plenty of reasons to feel frustrated, concerned, and ask tough questions of each other. I feel that too. But when we come into conversations like this one with combative mindsets, any point made can be lost in that kind of rhetoric. Holding grudges for past decisions, actions, or statements will get us nowhere that we want to collectively go. Painting someone on the opposite side from us with vitriol will only harm the conversation. If any of us, hope to be heard in all parties involved in these discussions, I'd encourage all of us to be mindful in saying what we have to say with some empathy toward those who see things from a different perspective. Some of us in this room are just encountering this sort of thinking recently. Some of us have been steeped in these conversations for years, and there is empathy to be found for all. I'd recommend that moving forward, school leadership use studies as well as a committee of researchers, community members, teachers, and professionals to develop a strong plan to move forward, whatever the decision, similar to how we have taken a step back in the high school scheduling conversation, for those of you familiar. It is clear that there is an amazing amount of resources right here in our community. If we create a committee with intentionality, there is an incredible opportunity for success. I have said it before, like many of us have said similar things before this meeting, but it feels worth repeating. I hope that rather than continue to lean into divisiveness, we as a community can move away from the temptation to see this issue or any other as an us versus them, school leadership versus parents, or have-nots versus haves, or upper working or lower SES versus other classes. I hope we can move past mistakes made in this effort so far on both sides to see this moment as an opportunity in our city to build an incredible district that works for all of our students. I don't know what the best path forward is yet, but I know that assuming malintent by anyone is a quick way to shut down a productive conversation. I believe that in general, we collectively in this room have a similar goal of making our schools amazing for all of our students. I continue to hope that we can work together through the challenges of listening to perspectives that may challenge our own to make that happen. Thank you for all of your time and efforts in this work.
Thank you. Katie Edmonds and then David Fisher.
The proposal to merge Childs and Templeton was presented to the board on December 12th. Over the past 3 months, several major concerns about the process have emerged. These concerns include communication, logistics, and timelines. At the January meeting, a representative from the NAACP asked the board to please prioritize equity-centered engagement with those who face scheduling, transportation, language, and cultural barriers that may prevent them from attending these evening meetings. The board vote included a commitment to parent forums, teacher forums, and an online question portal. Has any progress been made toward equity-centered engagement with the community? Is there an online question portal? Since the board president indicated in a recent interview on WFIU's Noon Edition that the proposed Childs Templeton merger is basically an experiment that we might want to replicate across MCCSC, it's appropriate to inform and poll all MCCSC families. It's worth noting that the Childs Templeton merger is not just, Childs and Templeton are not just the easiest pair of schools to merge, it's also the least necessary. It's the one pair of schools where it would be straightforward to move some boundaries to achieve the same SES balancing goals without forcing teachers to move their classrooms, without disrupting the multi-age classroom, without making kids transition schools before the critical third grade IREAD standardized tests. The research is clear that continuity of care and minimizing transitions from one school to another are important. So dividing elementary schools into primary and secondary schools is a strategy that should only be undertaken when other solutions cannot be found. Today, I'm also asking the board to be realistic about timelines. We're discussing a plan that was released in December with a proposed start date of August 2024. That schedule doesn't give teachers and administrators enough time to plan a smooth transition. With all the uncertainty, it doesn't give families enough time to adjust their schedules to accommodate complex pickup and drop-off arrangements. The most unrealistic part of the proposed timeline is trying to merge elementary schools, starting with the preschool classes, when the entire preschool and pre-K programs are undergoing dramatic disruption. We've promised pre-K spots for every 4-year-old at their districted school in the next academic year. It's hard to predict how many teachers and classrooms will be needed, but the class size restrictions are strict, so there will surely be some challenges in August, and more challenges again the following August when preschool program for 3-year-olds is reinstated. The preschool program is an important equity goal, and it is supported by a community-wide referendum. Let's make sure to get it right, and to let the dust settle before making huge structural changes to our elementary schools.
Thank you. We have David Fisher and then Amanda Rutherford.
So thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk. I've attended all these meetings, and every time I go in the room, they're like, "Hey, you want to make a public comment?" And I never do, and so I figured I might try. I want to just say I agree with pretty much everything that's already been said, especially the last two speakers. The previous speaker talked about engagement, and during this process, I think I was most disappointed with the kind of engagement that occurred. I'm new to this process, and it's been very exciting to learn about it, but I often found people using the word gaslit, and I feel like that word gets overused. But I think gaslighting is like when you tell someone this thing and then you're doing something else, and they feel a little crazy. So I'm wondering, maybe it seems like I worry that nothing I say right now can change the trajectory of where this decision is going. But maybe in the future, is there a way that we can met out the information and structure the conversation in such a way that it doesn't seem like it's a foregone conclusion? People said it was a foregone conclusion, and there was a discussion, and we were sure it wasn't a foregone conclusion, but I don't know if I'm fully convinced that it wasn't from the beginning, but help me in the future maybe to understand how these decisions are made and engage with us as partners so that we're not figuring out the plan as it's being made. I think that's been very disheartening about this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Rutherford and then Ken Zhu.
Thank you, members of the board, for the opportunity to provide public comment this evening. I would like to offer a few points of feedback regarding remarks made at the community meetings last month. All comments are my own and do not reflect any organizations to which I belong. First, we should avoid conflating moral imperatives with the identification and evaluation of policy options intended to address them. The conviction to address issues of inequity in education is a priority shared by many in this community. Much of my own research seeks to address inequitable opportunities and outcomes in K-12 and post-secondary education. However, it is also the case that there are multiple policy options that should be considered in determining how to most effectively address the moral imperative regarding increased equity across schools. Some strategies will be more effective than others, and rigorously designed research can provide valuable information to guide the comparison of the costs and benefits of multiple options. How can we make sense of research in a meaningful way? By consulting a range of scholars who can identify valid evidence and inform the creation and implementation of policy. The memo two of my colleagues and I provided to the board, and to which I referenced in the community meetings last month, summarizes studies that address mechanisms of peer group effects, as well as the expected benefits of exposure to diverse experiences. For the former, we find that peer effects may not be large. In the latter case, the ethical value is clear, but the outcomes are difficult to measure. The conclusion of our memo was that current board considerations are terse and do not provide enough information to enable meaningful evaluation. The memo should act as a fuel for dedicated effort to gather information, including more research and more specific data on expected costs and benefits. To date, members of the board have not provided a clear list of research that informs their arguments. Instead, some members of the board were quick to frame the memo I helped to write as disruptive or even invalid through vague language regarding disparaging comments that might be made about its authors or some type of inappropriate bias that the authors possess. I would remind the board that in addition to maintaining professionalism, this issue can be tackled in a collaborative and a constructive manner. Those who author the memo welcome feedback and a transparent approach to sharing additional rigorous research that can be considered by the community. Indeed, over the course of just a few days earlier this month, I exchanged ideas and discussed existing scholarship with the individual recently featured in a WFIU Noon Edition interview. As colleagues who have known each other for years, we respect each other and collectively work to think about how existing knowledge on mergers, school closures, and related processes can be applied to the MCCSC case. For example, we discussed threshold effects, where exactly how different two school populations have to be in order to
to detect some type of peer effects on moving or receiving students in the case of school closures. Frankly, it was refreshing. I encourage the board to do more of this to generate an evidence-based discussion that can consider both the moral imperative at hand and possible strategies that are most effective in addressing
Thank
existing
you.
inequities moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Kunju and Bipin Inamdar.
I did a survey last week after the board told us to think of parents that could not make it to the meetings. I believe for such public policies regarding young children, identifying problems deserve more focus than the claimed benefits do, because many of these negatives are destructive and simply not reversible. When I went to Templeton trying to deliver the online survey, one parent refused it immediately, saying, "I cannot do it right now. I have to go to work after picking up my kid." She is a mother with a baby asleep in the car seat, and apparently she needs more sleep. Unlike those could be benefits, I realized, and I hope the board can also realize, that these negatives are real, and they will certainly happen if the proposed merger gets pushed through. I urge the board to take into account the following. First, the merge will add financial time cost stress in an unaffordable way to families that are already struggling. Among all the 49 responses to an open-ended question, a single mother points out that it will almost for sure cost her job. Whether she is a child's or Templeton parent will not invalidate the real devastating consequences to her and her job and her children. Second, it will pose unnecessary challenges to children with special needs. Again, this is repeatedly asked. About 10% responses have concerns over the psychological and special needs services. Third, when this negative happens, many families affected may not have the time and money to take proper legal actions to defend their rights afterwards. And many of them are the people that the board told us to think of. Pushing through the merger is taking advantages of these families. I respectfully request the board to ensure that a merger shall not be pursued if any of the following is true. If potential negative effects have not been identified first. Second, if solutions or mitigations to those effects have not been well cooked and in place. Third, if investigations and analysis that guarantees the benefits have not been carried out. Fourth, if the results have not been released to the public for review. In short, you should not look for unguaranteed or controversial benefits. You should instead focus on the negatives that will happen for sure. You should focus on avoiding devastating struggling families, and you should look for a better solution to improve the numbers on the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Bipin Inamdar and then Eileen Wenzel.
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to make my comment. My name is Bipin Inamdar. I have a child in Child's Elementary and another one who I hope will go there in 5 years. I believe that the board owes the community a community an explanation of why the superintendent's terms last year was bought out. A cursory statement is
We
simply
can
not
actually,
acceptable.
that's actually not something that we can discuss.
Well, okay. I mean, I'm done with that part. Um, but we still shouldn't make this a model of how the appointments are made in the future, right? That an official gets appointed for a term, gets paid for the whole of the time, and gets to work only 2/3 of the time. I would personally love to have a gig like this, but MCCSC shouldn't acquire a reputation for making appointments like this.
He's talking about a future appointment. He's saying in a future appointment, this should be, but we need to stop the conversation about this particular line, as it is a personnel issue.
Okay. Okay. Um, just a last word on this, that the board should probably look into putting in guardrails so that such situations won't happen in the future. Uh, Now consider the hypothetical that if the almost $250,000
Sir,
were just distributed
Sir,
among
you have to
families.
stop this comment. Like, we can't actually comment on this particular issue. It is a personnel issue. And so if this whole comment is going to be about this particular issue, then the comment has to cease. If you have something else to talk to, like regarding the merger or something else like that, you're more than welcome to speak on that. But if it's all about the superintendent and that sort of issue, that is a personnel issue that we cannot speak about right now.
Sure thing. Just a last sentence on this. And I'm sorry, when you said personnel in the beginning, I heard personnel.
Oh,
So
sorry, personnel.
I mean,
Personnel.
I figured I wasn't being personal because it's a
No,
it's
no,
a
no,
public
no.
issue, right?
No, it's a personnel issue.
Just that I think that the board should regain the community's trust before making consequential decisions, especially when they are understudied.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity.
We have Eileen Wenzel, and then we have Nicole Freeman.
Good evening, board members. My name is Eileen Wenzel, and I'm a parent of 3, 2 who are current MCCSC elementary students, and 1 rising. The board promised during our last community session that it would share the research it's been reviewing. The board also promised to publish the FAQ page. There's been no action by the board on the request to survey the teachers and families that would be directly affected by this merger. I would like to request a stated timeline for the delivery of these items to your constituents. I'm well aware there's a lot on the board's plate right now. I'm sure I'm missing some, but bear with me as I read a list of the initiatives, discussions, and issues that the board is currently involved with. The high school schedule change, the rollout of new early education programs, the $2.9 million purchase of the Herald Times building, any update on that, the $229,000 buyout of the superintendent's contract, which was hastily voted on and announced on the Wednesday after the superintendent's dissertation came to life, the controversy surrounding Dr. McCormick's $144,000 contract, tonight's $6.1 million in appropriations, which specifically mentions Templeton, but what about the other schools? The final year of the ALPS transition to Fairview, the new arts transfer program at Fairview, the potential new referendum to support arts programming, the current transportation issues, electric buses that break down and shortage of bus drivers, hiring an interim superintendent, starting the process of hiring a permanent superintendent, managing the transitions between and among the current superintendent, this interim superintendent, and the next permanent superintendent. Not to mention redistricting, SB1 and IREAD. That's 15 projects or issues before I even mention the merger. And all going on in election year, and all going on when you have a deficit of public trust. You all have day jobs and lives and families to care for outside of your service on the board. I respectfully request that the board share any plans and timelines with your constituents as we share the desire to understand how so many large-scale changes can be managed well to ensure the needs of current and future students, especially with a new superintendent. We have been told that the board would vote on a merger before any details would be worked out. The board has told us the administration works out the details, but the board bought out the superintendent's contract. If the details of the merger are the responsibility of the administration, the board must wait until a new permanent superintendent is hired before going forward on a vote of this merger. The new superintendent might have other ideas on how to rebalance SES in our elementary schools. Right now, I can think of no bigger equity issue than SB1 and the impact on our third graders who would not pass IREAD. For the students of this proposed merger, they would experience a huge transition in the very year that their score on IREAD could mean retention. We know from studies that the year of a transition has negative effects on academic achievement. In light of SB1 becoming law, please reconsider this merger and how it would negatively affect Childs and Templeton students, and moreover, how it would affect the most vulnerable students. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole Freeman, and then Jonathan Warner.
Hello, I am Nicole Freeman, and I respectfully urge the postponement of the proposed Childs-Templeton merger considering the imminent leadership transitions within our school district. With a future superintendent set to be appointed for 1 year coupled with 4 board seats up for re-election in November, at this point, as has been done with the high school schedule change, it is crucial to put the merger and probably any major proposed policy changes on hold. Planning and implementing this merger would require significant leadership and administrative effort, a task that, according to this board earlier this month, falls squarely on the shoulders of the superintendent and their cabinet. With the impending transition to an interim superintendent, it would be impractical and unfair to expect cohesive planning and execution of such a substantial change within such a limited time frame, with everything else Ms. Wenzel just mentioned going on. Furthermore, given the uncertainty surrounding the upcoming board member elections, it is essential to ensure that, just like with any future personnel hires, any decisions regarding the merger are made with the full participation of the newly constituted board. Postponing the merger would allow for greater inclusivity and transparency in that decision-making process, enabling any potential incoming board members to contribute their perspectives and insights. In conclusion, I urge the school board to prioritize prudence and foresight by postponing the elementary school merger discussions, until after the completion of the leadership transition and board member elections. This approach will facilitate a smoother transition for everyone and allow for more informed decision-making in the best interest of our kids and our community.
Thank you. Jonathan Warner, and then Corey Calbaugh.
My name is John Warner. I currently have one child at first grade at Childs and another one in the preschool program. I want to express my concern over how the process behind the merger is played out, and not necessarily the merger itself. I believe the process has been flawed from the beginning, specifically starting with Dr. Oswald's original report on SES balance in December. That report, in my opinion, started with Step A, MCCSC should balance SES throughout the district, and ended with Step F, Templeton and Childs should merge. What was missing, and still is missing, are Steps B, C, D, and E. And when parents have asked about Steps B, C, D, and E, we've been either met with silence, a not-so-veiled hostility that by asking questions we're snobbish elitists, or unfounded assurances that the details will be worked out later. I'm no educational expert, but I believe that starting with Step F and working our way backwards is a flawed process. While my many years of public education have taught me that any valid study must start with Step A, in which case I believe should be how to create district-wide SES balance while ensuring the least educational disruption possible. The study should then work through Steps B, C, D, and E, and finally, once everything has been looked at, we reach a conclusion of Step F that is supported by the research done by the other steps. This assures that Step F is the best plan possible. Maybe the Templeton-Childs merger is the best plan, which in case, great. But there is currently no way of knowing if that is the case. I do know that starting at Step F and working backwards pigeonholes us into one solution when there very well may be better ones that serve more students and offer less disruption. But once again, with the current process, there is no way of knowing. Overall, this flawed process leads to feelings of distrust, and I can think of no greater fear as a parent than having mistrust in our educational leaders tasked with providing the best educational experience for our children. So, I urge the board to earn back our trust. Before any vote is taken, do the work first. Start with Step A. Look at all scenarios, study all contingencies, and then put forth a well-thought-out plan that can be looked at and discussed by the community. I've heard board members say things such as perfect is the enemy of good, or talk about gut feelings when discussing the proposed merger. Such comments, while maybe not intended, only increase the community's general mistrust that the board and the administration do not want to do the work necessary to ensuring that SES district-wide is carried out in a thoughtful and well-planned-out way. So again, please do this process the right way. Start with Step A, which once again I believe should be a plan that creates district-wide SES balance while ensuring the least disruption possible, and work your way to Step F, and not the other way around. Only then can we trust the process and trust our leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Calbaugh, and then last we have Paul Farmer.
To the board members and to my fellow Bloomington community, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Corey Calbaugh, and I'm the father of two in the Rogers-Binford district. Professionally, I'm an epidemiologist and faculty member in our School of Public Health. For more than 2 decades, I've been studying the impacts of structural inequities on health outcomes. Most of my work is focused on unconscious bias and the ways that such biases factor into how people in positions of power treat those who have less power. What we know about biases is that they're formed early in life and driven by personal experiences. Things that we hear our family and friends saying about others, choices that are often made by others on our behalf, choices like the one we are discussing today. Depending on what you're hearing and seeing, these biases can be negative, but they can also be positive. If you think the merger would only benefit Templeton students and families and at the expense of child students and families, I'm going to challenge you to consider why you think that. And if you'll allow me, I want to suggest that the proposed Childs Templeton merger will be a great thing for our whole community. It might be a particular gift for those who are a part of the existing Childs family. And here's why. I grew up in a small town in the American South, and I was zoned for a low resource school despite living in a better resource part of town. There was even a school closer to my house in this better resource part of town. The low resource school was further away, and I took the bus to get there because both of my parents worked and started their work days early. My parents could have easily petitioned for me to go to the more affluent school, but they didn't. And as a result, I was around people that didn't look like me or have my same advantages, and I'm so much better for it because these people became my classmates and then my friends. And the experiences I had with them helped me see their humanity. There were no longer these stereotypes that my older relatives would make jokes about. They were human. And when you see people as fellow humans, deserving of opportunities to thrive, you can't help but care. At 46 years old and now with more than 2 decades of professional service in medicine and public health, I can see the ways my childhood experiences have caused me to care in the very particular ways that I do. I see resource issues in our schools as an us problem, not a them problem. I've seen how these things are better when we share what we have. And I want to suggest to you that we have an opportunity to shape our community and our children's lives in a positive way through supporting this merger. We have a very particular chance to show how much we care about all of our children, their futures, and our precious Bloomington community. Thank you for your time and for all the work that you all have put in on our behalf.
Thank you. Last, Paul Farmer.
Thank you, President Hennessy, Dr. Oswald, and board. A month ago, I was up here knowing when you had the board policy was brought forward, and I made a comment that I said I can thank you on behalf of me because at that time our board of directors and our ARs haven't met. We hadn't had an opportunity to be able to talk about the policy, and I want to tell you it was absolutely unanimous with my board of directors as well as the association representatives that they were ecstatic. They were elated to know that you as a board really absolutely feel that their voice is incredibly important, so much so that you're willing to put that into policy, that you're going to do that. It's kind of a little ironic and a little apropos. A little more than a year ago, this coming up a couple weeks, on April 13th of 2023, we took over 550 plus teachers, plus over 10 buses up to the State House floor. We got an opportunity to go up there. Dr. Oswald was with us, and I think maybe even some board members were there also with us. We got to tell the legislators how we felt about public education, and in particular, Senate Bill 486, which was the rule that changed the law from a shall to a may. And of course, I mean, we did the best we could. It of course passed, and so it was a may now. It was interesting this past month. I've had a great opportunity to talk to a lot of people, and in particular, I had a real good conversation with one individual. They came to me and they said, well, you guys got a state law. Why do you need a board policy on that? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. You got a law. Well, you open the door for me, I'm going to talk. Okay, you all know me. I've been around here for quite a while, and I'm going to talk. And so we had a conversation about the difference between the shall and the may. And one of the things that, you know, I was talking about the state stuff and discussion, and they go, I can't really follow what you're talking about. I said, okay, let me change it. Look at our board policies that we currently have. We just passed an anti-racism policy. Can you find the word may anywhere in that board policy? You better not. You're going to see a will and a shall. What about anti-harassment, sexual harassment? Are you going to find a will, a will or a shall? The answer is yes. You're not going to find a may. What about student and staff safety? You better have a will or a shall and not a may. Those are important. There's a huge difference between those. You know, anti-racism, it's not a, well, we'll do it if we want or not. And that's what I'm going to get the double bell here in a second. But that's the culture that we have here, is that no, we truly believe in collaborative work, and we want to hear our teachers' voices. So ARs and board, we appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I do want to thank everyone for your public comments tonight. I really do appreciate that. We are going to convene the rest of our board meeting. Those of you who would like to stay and listen to that, please do. For those of you who need to get up and leave, why don't you take a minute to do that now? I'm just going to pause so that if we have any major shuffling, we can do that. Okay, so we will move now to the consent agenda. Now for our consideration is a consent agenda that includes the following: the memorandum and minutes from the executive session and regular board meeting held on February 27th, 2024, minutes from the work sessions held on February 28th, 29th, 2024, the memorandum and minutes from the executive session and special meeting held on March 6th, 2024, ECA expenditures, financial report, appropriation balance report, and register of claims, our payroll register and payroll claims. Do I have a motion regarding the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Ashley that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. Next for our consideration are donations. We've received over $8,000 in donations. We want to thank all of the donors for their generosity. Do I have a motion to accept the donations?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Brandon and seconded by Kathy that we accept the donations as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve donations signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Okay. Now for our consideration is the final reading for Bylaw 135, which is meet and confer for school employees, exclusive representatives, and discussion rights. Is there a motion to adopt Bylaw 135 as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Kathy and a second by Ashley that we adopt Bylaw 135 as presented. Do we have any comments from the board on this issue?
I will just reiterate what Paul said, is I'm really, really glad that we as a school corporation, though the legislature took away the teacher's voice to officially have to be in the process, and when we're making like unilateral decisions about their workplace, which is our children's learning environment, I think it's very important that we hold teachers' voice as central to that process, and so I think we're a role model for the state to be able to say that while the rest of the legislature might not think that it's important to have them involved in that, we will still adhere to this. So I'm grateful.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other comments?
I do. So I'm going to vote no on this, and I want to take a moment to explain why. Because it's hard for me, because hearing from teachers is really important to me. I believe that we should take their perspectives into consideration whenever we make decisions. And I support unions. I'm so happy that our administration has an agreement with the MCEA, because I think that when you look at this policy, which has a number of things that would require discussion, these things look to me like things that are primarily the responsibility of our administration. And I think that it is primarily our administration that makes the decisions that impact our teachers' workday. And so I'm for that reason, I will always support an agreement that requires discussion between the union and our administration. But I have two concerns about this policy that I can't ignore. So the first is that most of these things would generally be within the purview of the administration and not the board. And so I think that when the board is asked to weigh in on these things, it should only be in unusual circumstances.
So I think, in my opinion, it would be unwise for a board that is elected to represent all of the students in the district to slow or limit our options for responding in unusual circumstances. And secondly, as the policy reads, it says that we have to have a discussion with, not with teachers, but with an exclusive representative. We have other policies that make it difficult for us to hear from all teachers. So to me, this isn't really a policy to hear more voices of teachers. It is a requirement to engage in discussion with one person before we can make a decision. And my concern is, and I did ask our legal counsel to make sure I wasn't way off base with this concern. My concern is that an exclusive representative could use the possibility of a lawsuit to change the outcome of a board decision, whether or not that is aligned with the perspectives of the majority of teachers. And so given those concerns, I can't see my way clear to vote yes on a policy that goes against the advice of our legal counsel.
Thank you very much for that, Board Member Cooperman. And I do hear some of those concerns. I do also just want to note that I have a couple of amendments to this, and there are a few amendments already included, and our executive assistant, Mrs. Butcher, has a copy of these amendments. There was some language that was not clear, and our legal counsel has encouraged us to sort of clarify some of this language. One of those is that it says the school corporation shall meet and confer, but that it should be really, typically it's the superintendent or his cabinet, so it should say something like the school corporation or a representative of the school corporation, meaning the superintendent, or his cabinet, whoever is thus appointed, shall meet and confer. So we need to make that adjustment. We have adjusted language to move away from simply K through 12, because we know that we also include preschool and adult education. So it now reads preschool through adult education. And then I think we needed to remove the line between number 2 and 3. So that is the line that reads, to facilitate meaningful input, the school corporation must discuss issues within the scope of paragraph 3 before making any decision. So that line was supposed to have been struck. But those are the very small amendments that we have made to this policy ahead of voting. Are there any other comments from the board?
Yeah, can you explain the first one more time, number 1?
Yeah, previously it read the school corporation shall meet and confer with the exclusive representative, but the school corporation, that left it blurry, because if it were the board, for instance, like as the corporation head, it would mean that those meetings have to take place in public, in a public meeting, and that is not what our lawyer said. It should be a representative of the school corporation, which is typically the superintendent or his appointed member from the cabinet. What did you say?
Kathy, were you going to say something?
Is it on this, is it on the agenda right now? Because there's some things that are struck on here.
The changes that President Hennessy has stated is not what you will see in board docs.
That's right.
Currently.
So this is the amendment. So Kathy, as you were the lead on putting this on, this is the thing that I sent to you. And so what our legal counsel said is that it should not read the school corporation shall meet and confer, because the corporation is blurry and vague. And so therefore, if it were us as the school corporation, the district does not, the board members do not meet and confer. We are saying that as a board, we are signing this policy that we send a representative of the school corporation, right? Because we don't engage in discussion ourselves. I don't know that there's, is that right, Tom? Okay.
I guess I thought that was the whole point of this policy. I mean, I know that the lawyers told us 2 months ago, like, suggested not to even bring this forward. So I guess I'm a little confused, because it seems like this. Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Well, I think if I'm understanding it correctly, it's just to make sure that this doesn't end up being, the discussion doesn't happen in public, this part.
Yes.
Is that right? That
Yes.
This part is.
Because I was told.
Is that not right?
It was said, I can pull up the email. Yes.
So I do have a question then, maybe this is, I think it's something you already answered. If the board would like to make a decision on something, say scheduling or something, can they do that without a conversation with the board with these amendments?
No, it still says shall meet and confer.
And that includes the board?
To not do that.
Okay.
But that, it still would require us to discuss
no,
at this
that's
point.
It will still say shall, but what you're doing is defining that it.
Who the
this is
school
back-
corporation means.
And this is back towards what the law used to be. Is that right? The part that she's trying to define, where discussion takes place between administration and union in private, not with the board. And union. Right. So, right, I understand that. Like, I understand your job is to say don't put yourselves in a box that you don't need to be in. Right. But if we want to go into that box to support teachers' voices in that thing. Yeah, yes. But this little part of that we're talking about what April's talking about, changing the representative part. That's the part I want to make sure is similar, where it wouldn't say that the board needs to be up here doing discussion in front of the whole world. Okay.
Can you clarify on the part that says to facilitate meaningful input, the school corporation must discuss issues within the scope of paragraph 1 before making any decisions. That's in the current version. Board President Hennessy mentioned taking it out. Board Member Scher asked if removing that would eliminate the requirement to discuss. And so I just a clear answer, because I'm not sure I even understand. Removing the statement between item 2 and 3, would it move discussion from a may back to a shall, or does it keep it as a shall? From a shall back to a may, or does it keep it as a shall?
That's so confusing.
Well, the point is, because what you're saying is, if you're taking out everything outlined in number 1, which says discussion must include, and if you take away that statement,
We don't take it away, though. We're not taking away the paragraph.
That sentence.
Right, but it still has a shall at the start of this.
Okay.
It still is a shall. It says we shall meet and confer.
So it's just cleaning it up.
Yes, it's cleaning up the
Okay.
But it is still a shall. There is no, it hasn't been changed.
Perfect.
Okay.
I just wanted to be sure we understood.
It's just making sure that this is not going to happen in public.
What is making it clear is that the school corporation is vague language. It doesn't designate who. So if you look at our old policies and our policies, it says like that the superintendent must blah, blah, blah with the board, that the blah, blah, blah must do, So this is just the school corporation doesn't designate who that is.
That's right.
And
So the intent hasn't changed.
No, the
Going back
intent
to what
doesn't
Paul
change.
has asked, it still prohibits unilateral decisions from being made without discussion.
Yes, it still says shall meet and confer all of these things here. It does not.
I don't know. Paul wants to know if he can say anything, but that's up to the president.
Well, hold on. Board Member Grimes has
one question. Would it make sense to somehow postpone this and get a copy of what we're actually voting on?
Yes.
Written so that we can read what we're actually going to vote on?
Board Member Grimes, would you like to table this motion for the next meeting?
Yes, I would like to table this motion till the next meeting.
And that means that the teachers would have an opportunity to weigh in on this next version, since this is being changed.
That's right. So these motion or the amendments that I have proposed based on our legal counsel would then be published in our official board docs, and then they would be able to review that, and they would be able to give any comment in our next meeting before we take a vote.
I second table.
Okay, so we have a motion to table and a second, so we will table this for our April meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Excellent.
Vote table?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we have to vote. Actually, okay.
And just, I know we can't discuss it after it's table, but Paul, you can have a conversation later, but to be clear with your teachers that are watching, your impression of the policy, the goal here is to clean up the language, but it won't change the intent of discussion kind of back to the original law all the way down. So.
Yes. Okay.
But we'll get the cleaned up copy on board docs.
Absolutely.
We'll get it to you earlier.
Okay, so we have a motion to table and we have a second. we're going to vote. Signify by saying aye if you're in agreement with tabling. Aye. Okay. Any noes? Any abstentions? That motion passes. We will revise, clean up, and table this. Okay. Moving on. We are moving on to item 6.02 for those of you who are following out there and got lost in that conversation as we did. We are now talking about attendance zone redistricting. At the January 23 meeting of the Board of School Trustees, the board approved to add to the March agenda 2 items, one of which was a continued discussion on redistricting. In addition, at the February board meeting, a resolution was adopted to begin the commencement of attendance zone reconfiguration. An RFP, or a request for proposals, was posted in the Herald Times as well as added to our website to seek proposals from demographic consultants and companies to study the redistricting of MCCSC's catchment or attendance zones. The deadline for RFPs to be submitted is April 12th. At this time, I would like to open the floor to continue this discussion with the board regarding the attendance zone reconfiguration, and note that we do have consolidation next, so this is really just about redistricting at this moment.
How does it work that, is my on? Oh yeah. How does it work then, once that closes at April 12th, then we see the bids, or how does that work after that?
Generally, the recommendation would be for, and it would probably be good to make that decision now in public, but generally 3 of you would meet to review those and then bring a recommendation back to the board. So because this happened before, you could make that decision now as to which 3 would like to review those RFPs, but that's really it, and then those 3 could review it, and then you could bring those back to the board. That's generally what boards do. I mean, Tom, yeah.
Okay.
So it would be, if you would like to do that now, you could decide who's going to review those.
I will say that there's also the option that nobody bids and we have no bids to look at, right? When we went through the board redistricting process, this sort of happened. It took an incredibly long time to get anyone who was willing to work on that process, to do the demographic and GIS mapping and things of that nature. So I don't know what we'll get by then, but my hope is that something will come about.
Do you think it's different for like redistricting seats versus redistricting schools? Because I feel like other school districts in the state have done this.
Yes. Yes.
So I would think that maybe it'd be easier to
I
find
do think
people.
it's more sort of readily accessible, and there are specifically, I've been doing my research, so there are specifically consulting groups out there who do a lot of work specifically with K through 12 redistricting and mapping. I've not really found any in Indiana specifically. Most of them are out of state. So if anyone out there listening knows of consulting companies or whatever in state that do this work, send them our way. But I do think that, as part of this conversation, we've heard a lot about redistricting, and I think that, one of the things that I heard was that that people are sort of looking for a broader district plan, which I think I'm certainly, on board with. I think that we definitely need to look at that plan, as we've talked about even in our community meetings, because of not only SES imbalance and things of that nature, but also population density changes across the past however many years since our last comprehensive redistricting. So I don't know, I think it would be really important to just hear a little bit from the board about redistricting and why it might matter, or what it's looking like for them.
This is not what you asked, but did you say that the RFP has already been posted?
It has been posted as of Monday the 25th.
Okay, thank you.
So redistricting is going to be a big challenge. I agree that it's very much needed because even as you said, population densities have changed so much. There's so much construction. There's so much going on in town. We've got some schools that are underpopulated. We have some that are busting at the seams. It will still create change. I went through it myself. My kids were redistricted a while back. So it will cause some uprooting, if you will. So that will happen, and it will probably affect more people in a big picture, but I do think it's something to consider. And as I've said in a couple of public meetings, I still would like to see as part of that process, possibly moving 6th grade to the middle schools. I still think that's an option. That 3 years in a building is advantageous to kids, and that's something I think we should look at in the scope of redistricting as well.
Yeah. I'm actually very much in agreement. I think that moving 6th grade up makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, both in terms of continuity and time in a school, and also just in terms of creating a little bit more space in some of our elementary schools that can be then used differently, especially as we know like pre-K is coming in. We have some preliminary pre-K numbers for next year, but just thinking about when we add 3-year-olds, what will that look like? What will our buildings be able to hold and handle? I think that's a sort of something to look
3 years
forward
to 12 years is a big age gap in one building.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. I agree. I'm just making space. Anybody else?
As you know, I'm generally in favor of this. I've been in favor for a very long time. It precedes Dr. Halswald's time here and coming to board meetings on this topic before. I do think that we have boundary lines in some areas in particular that we're drawn to keep certain individuals out, and they follow the lines that have been in place for a long time with racial restrictions in housing. So very much in favor of looking at this to help balance that as part of our balancing process.
To that end, actually, I brought this book because it was in my car, and I read this book a while ago, The Color of Law. It's Richard Rothstein, and really sort of covers the history of segregation in the U.S. and thinking about our own population in Bloomington even, and the sort of redlining that has happened and all of these things, racial restrictions, deeds that still have sort of racial restrictions on them. I mean, I think when you really start to dig, it's, it's really illuminating. And so I think there are lots of things that I would say we as a board really care about and are trying to work through. And when I sort of hear conversations or public comment about our children are just a number, or they're just a data point, or it's a manipulation of sort of percentages, I struggle with that because I think, and I would say that every person on this board, and I can't speak, for the board, but I can speak for the sort of intent and heart of the people on this board, that every single person sitting here is deeply invested in the children of this district, because this is a very thankless job in a lot of ways, right? None of us are sitting here for the power or the prestige or the paycheck or anything else really, except for the fact that we are here because we care about these children and we care about these issues that that are so deeply rooted in our community. I have heard from many parents, and I've been out there sort of talking to people daily, in fact. And, I think what I've heard from some parents has been somewhat sort of disheartening to me, which is that our district has a culture problem in many ways. And that there are people who don't feel welcome in this community, and that they don't feel welcome in certain buildings, and that they don't feel welcome in certain programs, and that they don't feel welcome in certain course levels. And that is a problem, and it is a deeply rooted problem. It is not just one that we can fix overnight by merging schools necessarily, or even redistricting, right? It's going to take much more than just those things. And I think every single person on this board understands that the action isn't the end, but that there's a number of subsequent actions that follow every single one of those decisions. So whether it's redistricting or merging, and I know we're not talking about merging right now, but I do think that that's not the end of the process, right? Because there's so many other things to do to address those deeply rooted issues, both in our community and in our district.
Since you brought the book up, which is one of my favorite books, I love this book. If you have not read this book, I really recommend that you do, because it does talk a lot about education and those school boundary lines in relationship. And it also talks about how long these things take from when they were in, when the inception of that happened to current day. And we still have lots of policies across the United States that were put into place in the 1920s. So over 100 years ago now, that are still impacting students to this day, right now, and people are having to find creative ways to combat that. And our community is not immune to that. No community is immune to that. There are lots of examples of this happening, and there are lots of examples of making sure to box non-white families into certain areas, and by building schools in those areas that are far across town from where they're at, so they have to move to start segregating out our students. And it does happen, and it happens here, and it has happened here. And I think that it's important for us to think about that as well. Like I said, that book is chock full of things and examples across the United States where this is happening.
One question that I have about redistricting, because I think overall it is a good idea for the reasons Board Member Grimes mentioned, in terms of some schools having a much smaller population and others, as you said, are busting at the seams. But one concern that I think about is, will it do enough? Because the thing that I fear is, as you mentioned, the culture of our community is, if you ended up in a district that you perceived as unfavorable, would you just make your way back to your original district through transfers? Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that really concerns me, because I think if we're going to do it, I want it to be meaningful and I want it to stick. Now, I think the things that make redistricting appealing is because it does address the entire district, because there are other schools that have low SES as well, and I don't want those children to be left, not addressed. But that, I just wanted to get it out there, even though I'm sure people will take one line that we say out of context and repeat it for months on end. But I just wanted to let you know what I'm thinking about that.
No, I think that it's a good point to the question about transfers, right? And I know that this is the case too, like when you think about controlled choice and other kinds of models, right, that you have to limit the number of transfers, or else everything is sort of out of whack again, right? So if you say, like, we redistrict and people are districted to these schools, and then, like, 30% of people want to transfer out, then it sort of creates imbalances again. So I do think that as part of thinking about this process, there probably is some sort of, like, and I don't know what that looks like at this point. I mean, we'd have to really look at the data, right? As sort of, how do we deal with transfers post redistricting or something like that? Yeah.
I would just say, I think it was 2019 in this room, we had a redistricting conversation about the history of redistricting, and the room was full, I mean, very full. Great conversations, great ideas. And at the time, I would say that that was what I thought number one that the school district should do. And I think being in Bloomington and being on the school board longer, I think I have changed my thoughts a little bit. I think that, again, we'll talk about the merger later, but I do think that, when the last redistricting happened in 1997, I would say that it actually created some issues with some schools that we're now trying to correct, and I think I would like to be humble and say that, like, we'll cause some problems too that we can't see right now at this point. And not to say that's a reason for not doing it, but I really want to look at it, and I think as a board, I think we all want to look at it and think about it. But I don't think it's one of those things that I would really have to be sold that this massive, massive undertaking wouldn't cause, well, I don't want to name schools, but just wouldn't cause schools like it did in 1997. I think it did cause a collection of poverty in one of the schools because of some decisions made. And to think that we're better than the boards that came before us and that we wouldn't make those mistakes. I just want to make sure that that when we look at it, that we continue to have those conversations. And I think looking at it, but I will say that my thought is leaning in the more direct, controlled ways that we can move the schools, knowing that where the poverty is at and stuff like that. So I like that option better, but again, I'm willing, have been a champion for redistricting forever, but have grown in some of my thoughts on that over time.
So I think that this goes back to some things that both Aaron and April were saying, and some conversations that that I've been having with community members in the past, and was reinforced by some of the speakers tonight. A couple speakers mentioned that they weren't really aware of the socioeconomic disparities in our community before this conversation happened, or in our school district. And I do think we've talked about some ways of I don't really want to use the word educating because I don't want to sound condescending. I think I would like to have more of a conversation about the inequities that exist in our community. Brandon mentioned that in 2019 we had a presentation on redistricting. I know there are experts in Bloomington that have studied how redlining has impacted our community and created both racial and socioeconomic disparities. And especially with the acknowledgement and my sort of new understanding that maybe we weren't all on the same page about that to begin with, that maybe we can do more to get on the same page about understanding that, about why we are where we are now. So I hope that maybe we could consider using either one of our parent universities or just another community forum where we could have a presentation similar to the one that Brandon Shire mentioned, where we talk about why is there this disparity in our community, and that's related to, someone said, is redistricting the preferable option, and that they haven't heard us speak on whether redistricting is the preferable option. And I can only speak for myself. I would say that if I were convinced that we could eliminate the disparities in our community through redistricting, that would be my preference. I'm not convinced because of the history that it is possible to eliminate those disparities through redistricting. And that's part of the reason that I'm interested in exploring other options. In my opinion, I'd like to explore other options at the same time as we explore redistricting. If I'm proven wrong and it's possible to eliminate those disparities through redistricting, I'd be thrilled. I'd never be so thrilled to be wrong. I've been talking to people and doing some of my own reading, and I haven't seen anything yet that has convinced me that that's going to be the solution to our inequity problem, and addressing the inequity problem is my primary concern.
I do like the idea of something similar to a parent U, because I've heard multiple folks say that it needs to be more research focused. And when you think about, you have a research article and you have the background section. We talk about the history even in our own town. And I know Ashley has done work previously about actual history of racial segregation in Bloomington. And I know there's local historians who have access to that information about how it does exist. And I think that when you get into some of these schools, if you've never, it's like you hear stories, but then it can really take your breath away what some kids are living, their situations that they are living with. And so I think it is something that we need to take seriously and we need to act on. So having that information on the background, but then also on the purpose, like here is why we are doing it. Because again, I feel like there might not be clarity. I feel like maybe if people understood a little bit more why we're doing this, and it's not just to inconvenience people or be disruptive, or to quote, a number of people, that we're just looking at statistics because we have ulterior motives in terms of test scores or whatnot. I really think that, again, we might get a little bit more buy-in, because I want to have that basic assumption that everyone has good intentions and wants what's best for the community. So all of this to say that I think that you might be onto something with that, and maybe even having like a community book club or something like that where we could all learn a little bit more about whether it's the color of law or its subsequent volume, Just Action. Because again, even reading about things that happened only a few decades ago is quite shocking that I did not know about.
Yeah, it strikes me that schools are not going to solve our inequity problems of our society. It's not going to solve segregation in our society or racism, but it can go a long way. Like, that's the promise of public education in general, is that we are dedicated toward, as a country, but we can narrow it down to here, as looking at our schools. It's not just for people who own land that were male and white. You know, like, we've been expanding opportunity forever to create a system that we hope will hold the promise for all kids, and we've failed to fulfill that promise. And part of what we've been doing in equity is trying to make sure that we do fulfill that promise and we remove obstacles. And so as a school district, like, we aren't necessarily going to solve racism, but our kids, we're dedicated to making sure they have representation in their materials, and that we're going to teach truth and history, and that we are working like heck to have representation in our teaching force and in our staff and so forth, and whatever we can do in those ways. And that kids learn, and that we have the anti-racism policy, by the way, that's a big one too in our system. But kids learn not to be racist by being in school and sharing space and sharing materials and being with somebody who's different than they are. That is what breaks down bias, is getting connected to somebody that you might think otherwise about, but now you know that person and you're together with that person. And so segregating ourselves within a school system, within a neighborhood, is depriving our kids of that opportunity to learn from people who are different than they are. And that opportunity is something that gives them, you know, the business community would call it like soft skills or whatever it is, but you learn from people who are different than you are, and you're sharing resources, and it's a back and forth, as I've said before. It's not just people coming and saving the less fortunate, but it's actually sharing. And so when you're talking about resources, a lot of people are very generous in this community, and we have incredible resources for people who are struggling. But in this case, I think, to me, what we're saying with a merger, with redistricting, is that you are the resource. It's not a check that you're writing, but that your social capital, your experience, who you are, sharing space, and ensuring that your child is going to succeed will help all these other kids succeed. And that's the group project to me. So, yeah, that was just my thought.
That's the group project. And actually, you know, I did read Just Action as well. I know it's interesting because I do think it's a whole community affair, right? And I've already started to sort of talk even just casually to members of our city council, to the mayor's office, and to all of these other sort of institutions to think about, like, how do we, like, begin to partner and have these conversations as a whole? Because it's right, we cannot be tasked alone with solving this issue. And yet I do think that there is something that is so central about schools that it sort of can prompt and push people in other offices to begin to do work. And I was reading in Just Action where they actually started this program for realtors. I think it was like Pasadena, California. And so essentially what they did is they wanted to change the way that their realtors talked about their schools, zones, or systems. And so they would have these like series of classes, but then they would also allow realtors to come in to play principal for a day, where they had to sort of really embed themselves in the buildings, right? And so that they could get to know not just the sort of reputation, but the actual teachers and the actual students and the people working in these buildings day to day, so that they couldn't then in good conscience go out and say, you don't want to live in this neighborhood because this is a blank kind of school, right? Or you definitely want to buy in this neighborhood because it's this kind of school. And so I thought that was just such a sort of innovative and creative way to really start to think about how you can bring these people together in the community to start talking about the community and the schools and the children in different ways than they had before. And I think I would love for us to be able to start sort of a movement or something like that. And I'm not saying, trust me, you know, I heard your list of things. I feel that list of things deeply every day. So I'm not proposing that we take on more stuff, but I'm saying, like, as a sort of trickle down that something like this could potentially occur in our own community, right, as a result of the work that we're doing.
Towards that end, April, we talked about possibly getting 3 board members who would consider RFPs or the proposals that come in. I'd be willing to volunteer to be one of those 3 if you want to move the conversation towards that.
I would too.
And I also don't have to be if you.
Yeah, I would be interested.
I think, yeah.
I think everybody's be willing. I see everybody.
Well, I will exempt myself from this conversation, so I am happy to. I don't know how we decide. If you do, should we vote?
Think of a
do you
number
have a,
between 1 and 10.
think of a number between?
I feel like, yeah, it's important to all of us, but I would give it over to Brandon, like double his vote, because he definitely ran on it. I'm happy to have him take my spot. Yeah, he can have my spot.
I agree with that. I think Brandon was the one who originally asked that we start this conversation, and so I would say if you want one of those 3 slots, yeah.
So you would be then one of the people who would vet the RFPs and bring them to the board? Okay, and then should we leave it to Ross and Ashley at that point? The 2 of them have volunteered. Are we okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, we did the high school.
Okay, so if we're gonna have, can we just take a kind of like informal showing of, and do we have to officially vote?
I
Can
don't
we just
think
sort of
so.
informally, okay, we're good? We're good, everybody's good. Okay, we're good. So Brandon, Ashley, and Ross will take on any RFP that comes and bring it to the board for the next meeting, so we can discuss. Is there anything else anybody wants to say about this process of redistricting before we close this conversation? Okay, seeing none, then I'm going to just close this discussion. Thank you all for participating in that, and we will move on to the discussion of the Childs and Templeton Elementary merger. Additionally, as part of the discussion held in January, the board approved a motion to add to the March board agenda for further discussion the consolidation of Childs Elementary and Templeton Elementary schools. As part of the motion, we agreed to hold 4 meetings to receive input from teachers and our community. Teacher meetings were held on February 21 and 22. 2 community meetings were held on February 28 and 29. As the board has had time to reflect on these conversations and the emails we received, I would like to open the floor for further discussion regarding the consolidation of Childs and Templeton Elementary schools.
So I'm going to recommend that we kind of repeat something that we said at the second community forum because it still seems that it gets causing some anxiety in the community is the idea that the original proposal or the original, not sure what to call it, strategy suggested that we implement a consolidation in 2024. We discussed this at the second community forum, but it might bear repeating. At the community forum, I didn't hear any board members express an interest in proceeding with this for 2024.
That's correct, but at that, because it was a working session, we could not make any sort of official statement because it might have been interpreted as a vote, so therefore we could not actually say at that working session that we are in a different kind of session at this moment, so people could speak to their desire or not to hold this in 2024, and I will just restate as I have that I am not in any way sort of in agreement that we would proceed in 2024. I think the time has far, far passed. We know that people begin schedule making and all of that stuff far earlier in the year, so no, not for me.
I'm not interested in proceeding in 2024 either.
Same.
I don't know anybody that wants to rush that into.
No.
It'd be feasible.
Right. Okay, so I think I just want to make that clear that the board has said pretty clearly that there is no action that will happen for 2024 regarding a consolidation or a merger of schools. Apologies that we could not say that in the working session.
I just want to say, I feel like people are looking at me. I also agree with you guys.
Okay, thank you, Brandon, for that. But I do think, that was painful. I do think if there's anything else that we would want to say about this, about the merger, about why the merger over, so we talked about like is the redistricting preferable? We sort of talked a little bit about why would a merger be preferable. I know, Brandon, you started to speak to this. So if people want to sort of talk about that, I think now is the time.
I guess starting out, someone had mentioned about all of the negatives that are going to come of the merger, but I want to know about what are the negatives if we don't do anything, you know, keeping the status quo. And that's kind of a rhetorical question, but I hear things, concerns about, someone mentioned earlier about having to make a whole new set of friends because you'd be making a transition, but I want to clarify and make sure I'm understanding. You would still be in the same cohort with the students that you'd always gone to school with. It would just be in a different building, correct? So you wouldn't necessarily have to start all over making new friends. Am I making the right assumption?
Yes, I mean, I think the one thing that people have said is that grade level, there will be more children per grade level in a building, but it's true that you would be in that building with all of the people who would come over with you.
So in a way that could actually strengthen a PLC like a PLC in that you'd have a larger pool of educators teaching the same grade who could work together and collaborate. And so that could be a possible advantage.
Same would also be true for student assignments in some cases. So there'd be, of course, more classrooms and a grade level. So more options for the teachers and principals work together to create those.
Sure.
Okay. I think it's also important on that point when you're talking about shifts from school, the difference between something that is a forced move and something that is a planned move. So I would envision when you're planning to move to another school, just like you would be when you go from elementary school to middle school, there are opportunities to provide continuity between those. There's nights where you go and visit the new place, meet potential teachers, those kinds of things. So you can shake your head, that's okay. But what I'm saying is a forced move is a lot different than a planned move because there's no control over that. And I have personally been part of the forced move with my kids, and it's a big decision, but ultimately they thrived from it.
I just want to clarify, when I mentioned PLC earlier, I thought I'm doing that thing that I hate when other people do. So to be clear, it's professional learning community, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So in case you're wondering what on earth is she talking about, like when people use military acronyms that civilians have no idea.
Yes, PLCs are, yeah, go ahead.
I also think one of the things that we talked about with redistricting is about transfers. And one thing that would happen here, and this would be something that administration would need to let us know, but there couldn't be transfers anymore between Childs and Templeton because they'd be one district. So you wouldn't see people transferring out of Templeton to go to Childs because that couldn't exist anymore. So I think that to me is one positive about the transfer thing that we're talking about with redistricting. How would you control that? And with this, there wouldn't be the ability to transfer between the two anymore.
As we contemplate whether or not this is the thing we want to do, kind of going off of what we said about Parent U, is there any way we could create some sort of repository or bibliography or reference list of the vast number of articles that do state that there are benefits to desegregating schools and having more balanced classrooms? Is that something that we could have on a website or something like that, just so that people could see what the research says?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we've created all kinds of stuff on the website for all sorts of different things, and I imagine that that would be true. It's something that we'd have to talk with the superintendent and his sort of team about. Like, I assume it would live somewhere under the strategic plan page or something like that. But it.
Yeah, I have a whole folder of things that I've saved.
Yeah,
We can
absolutely.
put it online.
Absolutely.
You'll send that to us. We can
Okay.
We can put it on the front page. It's somewhat prevalent.
Okay. Yeah, I think that we can absolutely do that. And I know that, I think it's sort of, I don't know. I completely lost my train of thought there. Seriously, people. I just did. That's just human. Happened. Just happened.
That's like
I do think, that when we think about the merger, I don't think about it as an isolated event, right? I think that, and I'm not saying I don't know what will happen. I don't think, we're not planning to vote on anything tonight, as far as I know, right? Unless there's a surprise for me. But I don't see it as a thing in isolation. I did hear someone say tonight, as you're looking at redistricting, why not look specifically at redrawing the catchment zones of Child and Templeton specifically, right, as a kind of potential third option, which is not one that has previously been on the table, right? And I think that one is an interesting one in and of itself because it is a somewhat a smaller lift in the sense that it could be done still fairly quickly without having to account for the entire district all at once. Like I could imagine redistricting happening in phases too, or something like that, right? That a true sort of balancing of SES is not something that can happen over the course of a single year, or a true balancing of all of those factors probably does take more time. So maybe that is another option to sort of look at as we get whoever it is to look at these maps.
To your point on that, it will also be important anytime you move towards that is to go back to the transfer conversation. And how do you begin to limit transfers? I know that it's all people have asked. So we've shared some financial reports on how much we spend at each school, but back through bargaining, our pay is really very mostly correlated with experience. Experience's number one correlation is with age. And so years of experience, right? And it's now called years of effectiveness. And so one of the complicating factors is we have seen a significant number of transfers. The transfers tend to go one way, and that is from our high poverty schools to our low poverty schools. So that means that as teachers have more experience and they transfer to lower poverty schools, right, the costs at those schools are higher. So if you have two teachers that are both teaching a third grade classroom, the cost could be significantly different. Our starting salaries this year are 52,000 something, 52,250 approximately. And our top of the scale is above 80,000. So this is really, and we're starting to address that with some of our strategic staffing of $1,000 currently, $2,000 next year to incentivize. But the reality is that we do have that practice and that trend. We know that I cannot remember, but a lot of our new hires go towards our higher poverty schools. So again, it all goes back to that transfer and how do you address the transfer practices, students and teachers. This is about students. If you were to merge the schools, you eliminate that, as I think you were kind of hinting at. If there's no sixth grade at whichever school, Child's, you can't transfer back. And the last thing that I will mention, and it's come up a few times on configurations, what my 2 cents on that is that the configuration conversation is really, we know that you want to limit transitions. However, if you look at effect sizes, having schools that are greatly segregated, right, is a much larger impact than one extra transition. I believe the gentleman that he just left mentioned that. He said, for students that are from that are not from disinvested communities, one extra transfer is not really a barrier to their progress, versus the benefit of having schools that are more closely aligned in terms of SES. So some of the conversations we've had from decades ago is defining community. And tonight and frequently we define Monroe County or MCCSC as a community. I would define that Childs and Templeton being 2 miles apart as a community. A lot of the conversations years ago, which were really prior to vouchers and charters and a lot of other conversations, was combining schools and reconfiguring between communities. These are schools that were 10, 15 miles apart. And really, before there was a conversation about the benefits of what is the community. And we keep talking about the community being Bloomington, Monroe County, not that we're looking at, merging a school in Bedford with a school in Bloomington. And I do think that's something we want to point out, that these are about two schools in the same community. And the last thing I'll say is that the caution in terms of transitions, and I believe that Board Member Grimes and Hennessy mentioned tonight, was really understanding that in all these conversations, the goal of having students at a school at least 3 years. I think that is a really smart approach. You mentioned it with the middle school, and 12, 15 years ago, there was a practice of having kindergarten centers and 6th grade centers and 9th grade centers. And there'd be a whole lot of students going into a building, thousands in some case, for 1 year. And the ability for teachers and for administrators and staff members to develop relationships. So in all of these conversations, redistricting, merging, all of them, you're having conversations in which the transitions aren't such that the students aren't at a school for at least 3 years. And so that allows that length of time. So in terms of the configurations, while there wasn't sound science on what the best configuration is, it goes back to that they're at these sites long enough to develop those relationships. And both of these plans do that. So I just thank you for letting me clarify those two things.
Yeah, I do just want to address a couple of things. Like I hear the community. I hear the concerns, the anxieties, the frustrations. I do hear these things, and I definitely, I hear these sort of worries about like the logistics and what happens when, and I don't think that those are superfluous. Like I think that they're important, right? Like I do think that this sort of concern about, will I have to make 2 drop-offs, or will I have to do 2 pickups, or how does that extend my day, or how does that extend my child's day? Like I think that those are real things, and I'm not discounting those at all. And in some ways, when we think about it that way, redistricting is preferable for me, because then we could retain certain programs and we could keep certain families in certain buildings for a sort of continuity of years. But I also think that, there are the sort of other complicating factors to consider. I do think that, as you were saying, teacher sorting may or may not be one of those, right? And so we have to consider like what that looks like. And I don't know that redistricting solves that problem necessarily. And I also I do just want to clarify one thing, and it is not that the cart's coming before the horse, although I know that that's maybe what it looks like, and I agree that process has not been perfect here, and I think that, one of the things, if I remain on this board, and that may or may not be true, and that's okay, that I would like us to think about in the future is how do we roll out large sweeping change, right? And what does that look like? Do we have a district policy or some sort of guideline for how we do that? I know that the union put out a statement, but I think as a sort of practice, we are a corporation, we are an organization, we are a sort of multi-million-dollar corporation, right, in the business of education. And I do think it's important for us to really think in some ways like a corporation, right? I work in business, I've said this, I work in corporate learning and development. My title is actually Director of Strategy and Transformation, believe it or not, right? So I really do understand that when you roll out wide sweeping change, there are some processes that should be followed. And I think that as a board, I would like for us to maybe do some board training on that, to think about like what that looks like, what change management looks like. But that's sort of future state, right? It's not something I can do at this moment. But I do think, we really did have these conversations as a way to sort of listen to the community, to take a pause, to take a breath. We are sort of investigating these other things, redistricting, and talking about the sort of reconfiguration of even middle schools and things like that. So I say that to say that we are listening, we're hearing, and it's not that those concerns fall on deaf ears, but here's the thing that I also want to say. We do have at our disposal, within our district as well, experts, right? I do think that we should collaborate with experts outside of our community, with the IU sort of community, because we have them right at our door. And I also want to say that within our district, we have teachers, educators, administrators, people who have been steeped in this work, right? And that they are also our experts. And that, so part of it is like when a strategy is brought to us, it is not just spaghetti thrown at a wall, right? But it is something that's brought to us as a result of a deep understanding of our district, of our children, of the community in which we live in, and of the things that we are trying to solve for. Now, those things may or may not always be the perfect end sort of outcome that we're looking for. But I do just want to sort of disabuse this notion that that this stuff comes from just out of thin air, right? It comes from a place of people who do education as their career, right? And I think that oftentimes educators are sort of deprofessionalized, right? They hold multiple degrees, master's degrees, PhDs. Across this district, we have people with many, 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 many degrees. They are experts in their own right in this work. And so I do not want to say that the things that get brought to us are not brought to us by experts, because they are, who have done their work and their research. And though that work is not always visible to the public, it is being done because that is the work that we have charged them with as a board, that we have hired them to do. And so I do kind of just want to say that maybe a little bit in defense of the people who work in this district every day and do the hard work and the heavy lifting of working with our students and our community. So.
One of the things, thank you, bro. One of the things that I feel like we heard over and over again with the teachers at the teachers meeting that we were invited to was, please just make a decision. So I feel like I would like us to lean into, not tonight, but lean into next month having a presentation laying out some of the things that we're thinking, some of the answers to the questions, and then voting on it, on the merger. So that's something that I would like us to lean into.
I agree with that. With both the need to move quickly and also, or not to move quickly, but to give people some feedback about the direction that we're going in. I think next month is a goal that I'd like to see too. The superintendent and I have talked about possibly sending a list of questions that might be determinative of our decision. So recognizing that not all of the logistical questions can be answered next month, but there are questions that might help us determine which direction we want to go. And so we could maybe do that next month. Also, someone noted that we promised to post an FAQ and the research that we're looking at. I think Erin already mentioned maybe we could post a list of some of the research that we've been looking at. I do think that we have committed to an FAQ that we should try to do by next month as well.
And we will work. You guys can work on some of the research you've gathered, and I know people have been sharing a lot of it. And some of the questions that we've been asked are more board level, and again, the proverbial cart before the horse. You know, what I'll say is that we are preparing for next school year, and we are anticipating 800 kindergartners, and we're pushing towards 300 preschool. But we don't have all those numbers. We don't have those addresses. It's 1,100 students, and yet we didn't design the transportation system based on those 1,100 students. But what we know is that we do have the capacity and the capability in small incremental changes to make adjustments. If there's a huge shift and there's 50 less students in the south and 15 more in the north, and we have the programming to do that. So, you know, some of these conversations really are that we're confident that based upon the 2 miles apart and the short number, we're not really sure exactly how that will look like, right? It's some of the logistical information. But really what we want to share is that, you know, I've had conversations with those, for example, in logistics and transportation, is that, yeah, we're very comfortable that the closest to these two schools versus, you know, some of the O'Neill reporting had students going from Unionville to I think Highland Park or something like that. You know, we're not talking about large scale moving, you know, instead if there's 5,000 elementary students, we're not talking about changing busing and moving the location of 2,500 students. You know, we're talking about a small number of students, and we're confident we have the capacity to do that. What it will look like will really depend on, again, who needs the transportation, how many, and what that looks like. That's why, back to your point, when you take those incremental steps, it's something that we can prepare for. And you know, as Board President Hennessy said, I don't run the mapping programs in Edgelog or whichever company we use now, and do all that, but I'm confident that when they give us those assurances that they'll be able to make those accommodations. That's something that we know. So some of the answers will be that we're confident we can do it. And again, we have to see who needs. We don't know who. If you do this, we're not sure who is going to need the transportation from the child's community to Templeton that currently doesn't, and who does. But those are kind of things that they'll work on over the next year based upon the board's decision tonight, or not decision, but statements tonight that this is something you're looking at towards 25, 26.
I also wanted to say, other board members have said this, and I've said it in emails, but I don't think I've said it publicly. Someone said that we haven't really had a discussion of the negative impacts, or that we haven't maybe even done a good job of acknowledging that there will be negative impacts or consequences. I certainly acknowledge that. I think that any change will have some consequences. I think that maintaining the status quo has consequences, as Board Member Wyatt has pointed out, and that I personally think that it's about weighing those consequences against the benefit while centering our priority populations and the impact that it will have on them. So if I personally haven't spent enough time talking about the consequences of the change or the status quo, please don't take that as and to my fellow. I certainly acknowledge that there will be consequences. I think it's a question of balance.
So would that be something we would need to make a motion on, or?
Yes, I think we need to make a motion to keep these things on the agenda for next month.
Okay, a motion for us to keep 6.02 and 6.03 on the agenda for next month.
I second.
Okay, it's been motion by Brandon, seconded by Kathy, that we keep items 6.02 and 6.03 on the agenda for next month. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? No. Okay, that motion carries. I feel like I'm not even sure we were done with that conversation. We made a motion, so it didn't preclude any of the discussion. I don't think it was just simply to make a motion to put that. So I just want to say that if there's anything else that anyone wants to say about this topic, you still can.
The other thing I would say is, like, if you have certain questions, I mean, we recognize that all the details are not going to get hammered out, like you said, with the transportation depends on numbers. You have to go into discussion, hopefully, with the teachers over many of these aspects of the plan. And so, you know, whatever general questions we have before we vote, then, you know, I just don't want anybody to feel like we have to have the entire plan written up before we vote on it.
And I also just want to be clear that it is our intention to have a presentation, have some FAQs by next month, and for the board to take a vote, even though that wasn't part of the motion.
I think that was the general consensus,
Okay.
in part because, like, I don't think, I mean, especially to leave a community to continue to hang, right? They need to know one way or another what is happening or where we're moving toward, and especially for our teachers, because even if, you know, it's not until 2025 if something were to be implemented, right? We want to give as much time as possible for teachers to prepare, and we heard that at those teachers' meetings. Like, we want to know so that we can prepare whatever it is. And not only for whatever change, may it be redistricting or mergers or whatever, we want to make sure that our families have time to prepare as well, right? And so whether it's, you know, a redistricting or a merger, they need time to sort of prepare, understand what school they're going to be going to, and then, you know, perhaps even some events that we can do to make people feel like more comfortable in whatever school they land in, if that's where we land. So yes, I think that's correct.
I agree with that, as long as we are keeping our options open in terms of what the vote is. If you're saying, will we definitely vote to implement a consolidation in 2025, I would just like, because I continue to be interested in something like a backstop plan while we explore other options. So I just want to keep our options open in terms of what it is that we end up voting on.
Yeah, I don't think we said what we would vote on, just that there would be a vote of some sort with regards to this particular topic of redistricting, balancing SES, the whole whatever, right? So
yep, I'm on board then.
discuss your backstop plan next time?
Sure, I can say more about the backstop plan. It's not, I think it's not mine alone, but I can try to write something up that we could give us something tangible to talk about. Yeah.
You also could, it's just not to have one more thing, but based upon the information that you have, based upon Brandon, that's 2 people. We would like a third so that we don't, violate any open door, perhaps 3 people who would work together to sort of look at some possible recommendations to bring. That might be a strategy that would be helpful. If not, then you're coming in here with perhaps 7 people that have different, I know Aaron's nodding, 7 people with different ideas, at least then you can, and maybe you do have different recommendations, which you can do, but at least perhaps there's some clarity coming in of what some of those recommendations could be. So that's just a possibility if you wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So there's 2 people, so.
Did Brandon raise his hand for that, or did you volunteer?
Oh, voluntold.
You volunteered.
Sorry.
You want to work? Okay. So you're going to work on the RFP stuff and the recommendation. You're okay with that? Just want to make sure time-wise. Okay. And then Aaron, and then do we have a third? So I think we're going to talk about some options for motions to vote on at the next meeting. I'm interested in writing something more tangible about a potential backstop plan, but so that we don't just come into the meeting blind with 7 different ideas about what it is that we're going to be voting on, I think is the idea. Okay. So would you like to meet with me and Brandon to talk? It's also the end of the semester for me, but yeah. And I'm not trying to pressure you. I'm gonna look away from you because Ross is interested.
I
Okay.
can do it.
Yeah. Okay. So we have Brandon, Ross, and Aaron Cooperman who will be working on a kind of recommendation of sorts or recommendations for us for options or whatever they might be. Okay. Excellent.
That's good. That's better.
You don't like that? Indeed. Always better than chaos. Anyone else have anything to say on this topic or issue at this time? Okay. Then we will close the discussion of this particular topic at this time. And oh my lord, we have so much more to go. Okay, we're going to move through fairly quickly. I feel so confident. Next for our consideration is a recommendation to begin a process for an interim superintendent selection. I would like to make a motion to begin the process for an interim superintendent selection. I think I need to read this. Do I? No?
It's in board docs.
Is it?
Yes.
It's on board docs? Okay, cool. All right. I have a motion to begin the process for an interim superintendent selection. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Okay. It has been moved by me and seconded by Ashley that we begin the process for an interim superintendent selection as presented. And I do want to just open this up for board comment at this time. What does it mean? That's a good question. Okay, so my recommendation is essentially that we select an interim for a period of 1 year, beginning July 1st, 2024, and it would go through June 30th, 2025, in part because we know that we have a majority of the board up for re-election this year in 2024. I just think that it's probably unwise to appoint a superintendent who may then have to work with a newly appointed board. I think it makes more sense to hold that sort of final search or hiring process until after November 2nd when the board has been sort of established one way or the other. And so I suppose given no board turnover in November 2nd, then we could proceed with a search at that point. But
would this interim include a search and interview, like interviews or are you thinking, like what's the process going to look like? Is this going to be like are we going to open this up for applications or?
That was my question is, do we need to post this?
I was told by our lawyer prior to this meeting that we do not need to post this. That we could do, is that correct, Tom? Yeah, we could request people and interview those people specifically. So like say we wanted to make an internal sort of appointment, we could do that. We could ask a specific individual
for an internal appointment, but we're not required to post this.
I think, April, am I correct that whether just for discussion or for vote, the first thing we need to do is decide whether we want to proceed with an interim appointment
That is
before before launching a search.
That's
and
correct.
then we can kind of start to talk about how we do that if we decide that the interim direction is the way we want to go.
Yes.
Tom's nodding, which I
That
find
is the correct
hopeful.
thing. So the point of this is to decide, do we want to proceed with an interim? And then we can decide what the process looks like, but, you know, it's always on the table. We don't, who can be part? Oh, well, sure, we can decide how we want to do it, but I think the main focus first is to decide, like, do we want an interim? Because someone else on the board may feel like, no, I want to proceed with the superintendent search. They may want to amend this particular motion in some way. So there are several actions that can be taken. The motion on the table can be amended, and then it could be voted on and adopted in that way. It could be voted down, and something else could be proposed entirely. So we're kind of, all things are possible at
So
this moment.
we can vote on this, and then after that we can have a discussion about, because I feel like the timeline's very quick. So if we leave this meeting without deciding on how we're going to do that, when are we going to be able to do
Yes,
this process?
yes.
So,
I think we could, if we all agree that we're gonna proceed with an interim, we could vote on this and then decide afterwards process.
And I assume an executive session would have to be in place to discuss people?
People. If we were, so not process, but if we were discussing specific people, Tom, is that right? That we would have to do it in an executive session? Depends on the number of people.
Although it's not a regular superintendent, it is the interim superintendent that changes the whole statute. The other statute's not applicable. So it's basically the process you want to go to, but you couldn't meet as a board in an executive session.
Right.
You could not.
No. You can have, again, you can identify 3 of you to meet with these people.
Oh.
I see.
Can you meet as a board, though, to discuss the options of which people you want to speak with? Okay.
So would we have to say names out loud tonight?
No.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, that's so confusing to me.
Pull that out of your hat.
Okay. I think my blood sugar is low, truly.
Let's vote on the interim.
Yes. Okay, so the first motion on the table is, do we want to proceed with an interim? I guess the question is anyone opposed to proceeding with an interim? Okay, so can we vote on this motion and determine, yes, okay. So all those in favor of approving the motion as written to proceed with hiring an interim, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, any abstentions?
What I would suggest is we will give you an exact, here's the process that's available to you, and we will get that to you tomorrow.
Oh,
so
good.
you understand how it works.
Okay, that would be excellent. The thing on the table now, though, is someone has to be involved in those 3 people of selecting.
What I'm saying is you said you want the interim. Let me give you the description of the process, who can do it, how to go about it, and who gets it.
Does that
Doesn't
meet
want
your-
us to make any further decisions.
I know, he doesn't want us to make any further decisions, I see that. Is that okay, Brandon? Does that meet your?
of course.
Okay. All right, so we'll just leave this as for now. We know we want an interim. We'll wait for the lawyers to tell us what we should do to proceed.
Point of information, do we need to keep it on the agenda for next month? Can we make?
It would go on the personnel report next month if we have a decision.
Yes, it would essentially, if we made a decision, it would go in the personnel report.
Got it. Just want to make sure that everything's where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that motion carries. Next for our consideration is the personnel report. Do I have a motion to approve the personnel report as presented?
So moved.
It's been moved by Kathy and seconded by Ross.
Second, yeah.
that we approve the personnel report as presented. Dr. Stahlbaum.
Thank you, President Hennessy, Dr. Oswald, and members of the Board of School Trustees. There are no retirements to announce for the March 2024 personnel report. At this time, I request that you please approve the personnel recommendations as presented in the board packet.
All those in favor of the motion to approve the personnel report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? No. Any abstentions? The motion carries. We will move to contracts. Do I have a motion to approve the contracts as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ashley and seconded by Ross that we approve the contracts as presented. Mr. Kinney.
Thank you. There are 4 contracts before you this evening. There is also 1 bid to be awarded. I recommend approval of the contracts and bid to be awarded as presented. Thank you.
Do we have any comments from the board? All those in favor of the motion to approve the contract signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Now for district updates. Dr. Oswald, will you introduce tonight's presentation on equity goal number 3, student learning?
Absolutely. I can't think of a better goal which would prioritize. I mean, in the end, we talk a lot about our diversity goals, our equity, our access, our opportunities, but it all boils down in many cases to student academic growth. So this is an important one. So tonight, Dr. Dorothy Irwin, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education, is going to walk through a few examples. Just a reminder that the full presentation, links, all of that information is on our webpage under the strategic plan process. So we're going to give a few highlights here, but of course, you can do a deeper dive on your own, and we're always available for questions at another time. Nobody wants to see people, they don't want to hear about student learning.
Okay,
I'm joking, it's late, so I get it.
Good evening, everyone who is still here. I am pleased tonight to be able to address student learning, and this is what we're all about, right? So I want to ask Alexis, though, do I push the button this way? Okay. Aha, it's working. Okay, so we're looking at Equity Goal 3 tonight, and this goal is to accelerate learning for students, including priority populations, with accessible and aligned high-quality curriculum and instruction. And the outcomes of this goal are to accelerate learning through growth for all students, to identify and reduce academic disparity. Whoops, I think I just turned it off. Sorry about that, everybody. It's not that quick. Okay. Teaching and learning. These are key terms that we talk about all the time. And one of the important things is to recognize that our teachers are involved in the learning process as much as our students. And these 3 areas, last year I know it was discussed as pillars to a stool or legs to a stool. And really they're interdependent pieces, the curriculum, the instruction, and the assessment. Each one feeds into the other, and it's a continuous circle. And the curriculum is what we teach, the instruction is how we teach it, and the assessment tells us how well we're doing. We have high-quality curriculum instruction in pre-K through 8, and one of the things that has been a topic of discussion throughout the country, especially since COVID, is the science of reading. And the science of reading is a body of research that informs us, really it delves into neuroscience as to how children learn and how the brain responds to phonics, phonemic awareness, and so forth. And we're very fortunate in this district that through the foundation, the MCCSC Education Foundation, we were able to, a couple of years ago, receive supplementary materials that are highly acclaimed and focus on that body of research called the science of reading. We have intervention programs in our building that differentiate, in all of our buildings, that differentiate instruction so that we can reach that goal that when we talk about accelerating learning for all students, making sure that those students that are struggling get remediation time and those that are at proficiency level continue to work towards accelerating the learning. We also have PLCs, which were mentioned earlier tonight, the professional learning communities, which are wonderful think tanks, really, where teachers get together in grade levels or discipline areas, and they work together to examine data and to look at what we want the students to learn, and then recognize if they're learning it, and if they're not, what are we going to do about it, and if they are, how are we going to accelerate that learning. We're excited this year to talk about the expansion of pre-K, and we're really very grateful for the community-supported referendum, which will allow us to expand our 4-year-old program and make it more accessible to students in our area by having the opportunity to come to preschool at either a reduced amount of money or free. This program, and a lot of people have asked a lot of questions about it, it is a play-based curriculum, but we have to understand that at this early childhood stage that we learn through play. It's important for children to have the opportunity to mess about so that they're involved in inquiry, exploration, and discovery. And one of the things that they learn is school is fun. It's a place where you can be nurtured, other people can care for you, and you begin to realize that being outside of the home is not such a bad thing. Professional learning for this is going to happen with all of our teachers who will be certified teachers teaching in the pre-K. Many of them now will remain in those positions, and there are other teachers in the district that, as it expands, are very interested in working with our early learners. Professional learning is going to happen this spring and also in the summer as we delve into creative curriculum, which we've had in the district for some time, but we're now delving much deeper into it and making sure that we are able to reach the learners where they are. This DIBBLS data is data that we have been using this year. And DIBBLS, in case you're interested in what it stands for, it's Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. This is such important information for us. We're giving it to our kindergartners, first graders, and second graders in the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. And what this particular data set shows you is that line on the top of each of those graphs is the benchmark for where children should be at that particular time of the year. So our kindergartners, when they came in, were below benchmark, but look at what happened as we got to the middle of the year assessment. And now all of our data show that the students are above benchmark. This data can really be gone into too to find out the specific areas where children need additional support. Third grade literacy is a big topic in the state of Indiana right now because of the recent legislation that says that students who do not pass the iRead 3 in third grade will not be promoted. And that's not going to happen this year, but it will go into effect next year. This data really just show that the difference between MCCSC and the state. Because of this push towards retention for those students who have not mastered those or become proficient in those fundamental reading skills in third grade, we actually took the opportunity this year to give this assessment. It's not high stakes at all for our second graders, and it gives them an opportunity to actually see what that assessment looks like, and it gives our teachers the opportunity in second grade to begin to identify those areas. If students pass the iRead in second grade, they no longer have to worry about taking it in third grade. And it's interesting how many second graders pass that test. If they don't pass it, there is another score that is on track. And that means that it looks like they're probably going to pass it in third grade because they're right where they need to be in a second grade classroom. And then those who are at risk can be identified, and we can focus on the specific skill areas and foundational pieces that they need to learn.
If I may, this conversation or question may come up, but just a note that the 24 data, while it's preliminary and available to our teachers, is embargoed. It's not allowed to be released, so we can't put it in here. We can't discuss it. We can't share those results. We can't even give those averages. So just so that you know, you may be having conversations about individual results that are being disseminated, but the information is still embargoed. And it actually is, I believe, until the retest is over.
That's right.
In the summer, so it'll be some time. So there's a reason why the 24, there's conversation recently about the 24 iRead results. So just so you know, we can't share that data.
This is a piece that was put together so that the community can see that although as we're moving towards the future focused 2023 standards and we're looking at the different assessments that we do with our students, we are going to also move into the pilot area of giving checkpoints for our students throughout the year to see how they're doing as they're preparing for the assessment in iLearn. And what this shows is that with all the assessments that we had, you see in the last column there, the change of number, we've actually are taking away assessments as we are putting new ones in. So we are not adding to a point where we're just all we're doing is assessing. And these assessments are assessments for seeing where children are, and they're also for learning for us to be able to see what we need to do in the classroom. The iLearn EL proficiency, this is 2023. This just shows, again, the comparison between the district and the state. This is focusing on the priority populations, and we wanted to address that. This particular data set, if you look at it, there's a legend at the bottom that shows you that the blue indicates that they're above proficiency, the green at proficiency, and the yellow is approaching proficiency. And then, of course, we're very concerned about the ones that are in red, but we're able to go in and find out specifically what students are in that area and what skills they need. And this is the iLearn math proficiency, and again, comparing the district, which is the darker color, blue, and the state. And again, this is the data set that show the priority populations. And these populations, there is a question at the end that community members have asked about how do you decide who's the priority population. These are actually state named. These are the free and reduced lunch, the paid lunch, the ELL. Well, the paid lunch is not a priority population, but it shows you a comparison. And then the English language learners, the non-English language learners, the special education, and then just the general ed. We also, of course, have high quality curriculum and instruction in our grades 9 through 12. And we are working right now on the alignment, the IDOE alignment of the 2023 Indiana Academic Standards, which will be implemented in the 24-25 year as we are working on that alignment. Those will not be assessed until the following year, the 25-26 year. We have remediation and acceleration opportunities at grades 9 through 12, just like we do in the early grades. And I know you all have talked about those when you're talking about scheduling and Panther Plus, and those are all opportunities for students to get additional support. We have instructional coaching now also at the high school, which really helps with that teacher learning and being able to implement change within the school, the curriculum and instruction. PLC training, we have massive amounts of people going to the professional learning community in St. Louis, and it's a wonderful time for bonding for teachers, but also to learn some wonderful strategies for how to look at data and help our students. The SAT is given during the school day, and for those of you that remember when we took it on Saturdays, it's now given during the school day, and this data set just basically shows the difference between MCCSC's 11th graders, the amount of students that took that SAT in comparison with the state. Graduation data is also the same. We're looking at the difference between what MCCSC students, the graduation rate in comparison with the state graduation rate. We get feedback from our staff on the different goals that we have, and for this particular goal on student learning, the themes that emerged were data-informed instruction to meet the specific needs of all learners. And this, again, is available to you in the slide deck for this meeting. It will be on the website. And people were very excited about what we were learning from the DIBELS assessment. And we're looking at expanding that in other grade levels for next year. Opportunities for growth and expansion of programs at all levels. There have been some very positive staff feedback on bringing grades 3 and 4 of ALPS to Fairview. That's gone very well, and it's really exciting to hear that. And those students are also benefiting from the integrated arts that are in that school. More dual credit opportunities at the high school, and they would like to see that expanded. And then the early college high school at And the last piece, I know we're all aware of this, that there has to be a focus on mental health. And we've seen such a rise in that since COVID. And this is adults as well as students that have really suffered. And to get more training so that teachers are able to work with students to help support them, trauma-informed practices. And we've done a lot of that work here and continue to do it. And that is so beneficial to all of us. This is the community feedback, and the first question deals with what does that look like for priority populations, who are the priority populations, and that was addressed in the data set that was presented to you all. The expanded learning teaching positions, those positions, they're set to be cut next year. That's what that says. Those expanded learning teaching positions were funded by the federal government with the emergency secondary relief. Now I can't even think of it. It's S or ESS, elementary, secondary. Anyway, it's the emergency fund, and that is no longer available to us. But what we have learned from having those expanded learning teachers, which really was supposed to help that void that occurred when students were not in school, is our teachers have really done a good job, and our instructional coaching models have helped with this in doing differentiated instruction within the classroom, having flexible groups, and utilizing everybody in the building to assist with working with small groups of children, meeting them where they are. This is a fascinating piece that I would encourage you to go on and look in the slide deck and see the differences and the changes of what we're doing in the district to address the 2023 future-focused Indiana academic standards and the assessments and how we're making that shift, that gradual shift, and what we're taking on. And that's all outlined right here for you. So that's it. And our next topic will be staff diversity, diversity goal number 1.
Be the last one of the school year. Be number 8.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Irwin. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
I do have one quick question. With the students who can pass I-read in 2nd grade, will that, if they don't have to take it in 3rd grade, does that change the numbers for 3rd grade, or does it count when they get to 3rd grade? And the percentages of
Oh, you mean
okay.
in the data set?
Yeah.
Showing the data as to who passed? Yeah, that would count.
Okay.
They'd be in 3rd grade and they would have already passed it.
Okay.
It's kind of like that spelling test you practice for on Wednesdays and then you have to take it on Friday.
Right. There you go.
I don't know if any of you had that.
Yes. No, we did.
Didn't pass it.
Just
Any other comments from the board? Okay. Dr. Hoswell, do you have any additional information to share with us tonight? None. Okay. Well, with that, we have.
I have a committee report.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know. Oh my gosh, I skipped right over it. I am so sorry.
I have something too, but I thought you were talking about other district updates.
Okay,
So.
forget it. Ignore me. I skipped down the
Board
page.
number 9.
Number 9. Here we go. Committee and comments, or board committee comments and reports. I am just flubbing it up tonight. Welcome to my show. Does the board have any comments or reports you'd like to share?
I have a quick thing. I was asked to announce on behalf of the MCCSC Foundation that Golf for Kids is Thursday, June 6th. There are sponsorships and teams available. You can register on the foundation's website. All proceeds support educational programs and the grant programs from the foundation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any other board comments or committee reports? Oh, okay. Now, Dr.
Just a
Hoswell?
few reminder, gyms. This past Saturday, MCCSC held their 7th annual gyms event. Nearly 100 students in 5th and 6th grade from across Monroe County attended the event. Small groups of students attended 3 STEAM activities. That's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. Some activities the students participated in were learning about chemical reactions and making roller coasters, creating medical devices, and learning all about the eye. The student attendees concluded the event with a Q&A panel of STEAM professionals, and a special thank you. This event is just filled with dozens of people who you are in STEM professions Monday to Friday, and then they come on Saturday, and they give up their time very, very generously to support the academic interest of our elementary students who want to come learn from them. So it's really a great event, and we do appreciate all of the volunteers, including all the staff members who coordinate that, organize it. You go into the lobby, and it's just filled with employees and families and students and volunteers. So a special thanks to everyone who did that. Solar eclipses, though it hasn't been talked about, but just a reminder, all these notes about totality I'm skipping, but we are closed that day. We don't have school on April the 8th. Our facilities are also closed in our parking lots. There's some liability pieces there. We've communicated that frequently. We will have no staff members available that day, and other than for emergency purposes. So again, we do not have school on April the 8th. But Transitions Fair, the Transition and Community Resource Fair is hosted at Bloomington High School North April 1st from 5 to 7:30 p.m. The events for students with disabilities or different abilities of all ages and their families to connect with resources for employment, community access, and post-secondary education. This year's theme is Be a Star. It's a great event. If you've never had a chance to stop by, again, Monday, April 1st, the week before the eclipse, from 5 to 7:30 p.m. And then Fairview Elementary is hosting two events. I like to point out the first week of April. The Alps Family Information Night is 6 p.m. on Tuesday, April 2nd. It's free for all families of incoming third grade students interested in learning more about MCCSC's Accelerated Learning Program for Students, ALPS. And then at 6 p.m. on Thursday, April 4th, Fairview will host their Arts Information Night. These are two different things, and it's an opportunity for families and students to meet the Fairview administrators and teachers, receive tours of the school, and view the special spaces dedicated to arts instruction. I know that was spoke tonight by one of our public comments. All elementary students in MCCSC do have a chance to submit an arts transfer request to attend Fairview. Take advantage of the unique opportunities offered. Transportation is provided for students and families who are interested in attending the Fairview interested in a potential arts transfer. And again, all this information is on our website, but just a few of the really exciting things I'd like to highlight taking place the next couple of weeks before our next meeting. With that, I close my comments.
Thank you, Dr. Oswald. And with that, we are the next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, and we are adjourned.
There's a lot of things to sign, of course.
You won't run away.
Don't run away.
Thank you. I like being on this side now. Oh no. Sorry. I'm an adult. I did ride my scooter, so
Ready to sign. Karen, thank you. I'm going to give you this, of course, and the wheelie cart you have there.